For thousands of years, humanity has left behind traces of brilliance and mystery. Stones with unreadable messages, metals we should not have forged, ruins too massive to explain. Every artifact holds a question. Every ruin whispers a secret, and together, they form a trail across the world, through deserts, caves, oceans, and forgotten tombs. Some say these are signs of lost civilizations. Others believe they are messages, left for us to discover when the time is right. So breathe deeply. Let the noise of today fade away, and step with me into the silence of humanity's greatest enigmas. The iode aluminum wedge. There are moments in history where discovery feels less like science and more like stumbling into a riddle. The kind of riddle that does not fade with time. Instead, it lingers, it whispers, it challenges. The iode aluminum wedge is one of those riddles. Picture this. It is the year 1974, Romania. The region of Transylvania, a land already steeped in legend, dark forests, stone castles, villages that seem unchanged for centuries, and beneath the soil, secrets that no one expected. Construction workers are digging near the Mureș River, a routine job, unearthing layers of earth as they work on a trench. But what they find is not routine at all. They uncover bones, massive bones, the remains, it seems, of an ancient mastodon, an Ice Age giant, locked in the soil for thousands upon thousands of years. But near those bones, something stranger waits, a wedge-shaped object, heavy, metallic, covered in a thick crust of oxidation, as if it had been buried for ages. When brushed clean, it does not look like bone, or stone, or fossil. It looks manufactured, as if someone had shaped it, molded it, made it for a purpose. And here is the twist. This wedge is made of aluminum. Now pause for a moment. Aluminum. Today it feels ordinary. Cans, foil, kitchen utensils, aircraft parts. But in the ancient world, aluminum was impossible. It does not occur in nature in pure metallic form. To produce it, you need advanced technology, electricity, complex refinement. In fact, aluminum wasn't successfully isolated until the 19th century, barely 200 years ago. So what is an aluminum artifact doing, buried alongside mastodon bones, bones that could be 11,000 years old or older? This is the heart of the mystery. Some believe the wedge is proof of an ancient advanced civilization, a culture with technology we cannot even imagine. Others whisper of extraterrestrials, visitors from beyond Earth, leaving behind tools in places where they should not exist. But skeptics push back. They argue it is modern, a piece of machinery discarded, buried by accident, not ancient, not mysterious, just misunderstood. So which is it? Artifact or accident? Lost civilization or misplaced tool? Let's go deeper. The wedge itself measures about 8 inches long, shaped like a small axe head or part of a machine. Tests revealed it is 89% aluminum, mixed with copper, silicone, zinc, and traces of other elements. Not raw ore, not something that could just form naturally. It was deliberately created. Some analyses suggest the oxide coating that covered it was thick enough to take hundreds, if not thousands of years to form, meaning this object had been underground for longer than industrial aluminum has even existed. This is where the story tilts into the uncanny. Imagine holding it in your hands, cold, heavy, its edges worn, as if once functional, and then realizing it should not exist in the timeline we know. Archaeologists were divided. Historians shook their heads. Some dismissed it as a hoax, but others quietly admitted they could not explain it. Was it part of a tool, a piece of machinery? Some said it resembled the foot of a landing gear, a component that might belong to an aircraft, or even a spacecraft. That speculation caught fire, especially in Romania, where tales of visitors from the stars already had a foothold in folklore. Think about the context. The wedge wasn't found alone. It was discovered with ancient bones, the remains of creatures long extinct. That detail is critical. If the wedge had been unearthed in isolation, skeptics could claim it was simply a lost piece of farming equipment. But buried alongside mastodons, that complicates the story. If authentic, it means two possibilities. Either humans with advanced technology existed tens of thousands of years ago, or something non-human placed it there. And that is why the iode aluminum wedge keeps resurfacing in discussions of forbidden archaeology. It stands as one of those out-of-place artifacts, objects that do not belong where they are found, artifacts that strain the neat timelines of history. But here is where things grow even more tangled. The wedge disappeared for a time. After its discovery, it was sent to the Transylvanian Museum of History. It sat in storage, rarely displayed, often forgotten. For decades, access was limited. Photographs were few, reports inconsistent, almost as if its existence was quietly brushed aside. And that silence fuels suspicion. Why hide it? Why not put it on display? Unless it challenged the accepted story too much. History, after all, is fragile. One artifact out of place can topple long-held assumptions. Now let's ask, could it really be ancient? To believe that, we have to imagine a forgotten chapter of history, a civilization that mastered metallurgy long before ours, one that crafted tools, machines, perhaps even flight. and yet vanished, swallowed by time, leaving behind only scattered traces. It sounds like myth, like Atlantis, like the great lost empires whispered about in legends, but archaeology is not immune to surprises. Again and again, discoveries force us to rewrite the story of the past. Göbekli Tepe, the Antikythera mechanism, Upart's out-of-place artifacts, each one a thorn in the tidy fabric of history, and the Ayud wedge fits right in with them. Of course, the skeptical voices remain strong. Some engineers have claimed the wedge looks like a part of excavator machinery, specifically from the 20th century, a replacement tooth from a digging bucket perhaps, dropped, forgotten, and later buried deep in soil. But if that is the case, how did it end up beneath so many layers, among ancient bones? That explanation feels too convenient, too neat, as if designed to smooth away the questions rather than confront them. So we are left with two visions. In one, the wedge is ordinary, industrial, unremarkable, but in the other, it is extraordinary, evidence of something lost, something that does not fit into the framework of human history. Which vision do you lean toward? As you think about it, imagine standing in Transylvania at dusk, the river quiet, the forests pressing close, the mountains casting long shadows. Beneath the soil, mysteries rest, bones of giants, artifacts of unknown origin, layers of history stacked one atop another, and within those layers, a wedge of aluminum, waiting, silent, unanswerable. The iode aluminum wedge may never reveal its full story. Perhaps it is destined to remain a riddle, but maybe that is its power, not the answers it gives, but the questions it forces us to ask. Who came before us? What technologies were lost? And how much of history do we truly know? The past is not a closed book. It is a vast, dimly lit room, and every strange artifact is like a match struck in the dark, flickering, brief, but enough to show us that the room is larger than we thought. And so the wedge remains, a symbol, a challenge, a reminder that history is not fixed, but fluid, and that sometimes the strangest discoveries come not from the stars, but from the earth beneath our feet. That's the mystery of the Ayud aluminum wedge, not solved, not explained, just waiting for the next curious mind to pick it up and wonder. The Tekaxic-Calix-Lawaka head. In the year 1933, a discovery was made in central Mexico that continues to stir debate, confusion, and quiet wonder, even today. In a small town called Tekaxic-Calix-Lawaka, located in the valley of Toluca, archaeologists unearthed a burial site that seemed ordinary at first glance. The graves, the pottery, and the local artifacts all reflected the world of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. It was the kind of site historians expected to find in that part of Mexico. And then, among the soil and stones, there appeared something completely out of place, something that should not have been there at all. A small terracotta head, carefully sculpted, with features that looked Roman. Pause on that for a moment. Roman. In Mexico. The artifact, later known as the Tekaxic-Calix-Lawaka head, seemed carved in a style unmistakably Mediterranean, the shape of the face, the hair, the beard. Its expression all suggested the hand of an artisan who was not from the Americas but from the world across the Atlantic. A world that, according to everything we are taught, had no contact with the Americas until Columbus set sail more than 1,000 years later. So how did this head get here? Who placed it in a burial that dated back more than a millennium before European arrival? And what story does it whisper about forgotten journeys across the ocean? When José García Payón, the archaeologist leading the excavation, first reported the find, he could hardly believe it. Alongside the native artifacts, the strange head was catalogued, and for decades it sat in relative obscurity, puzzling specialists. Most academics avoided it, dismissing it as either a forgery, a misplaced object, or an irrelevant curiosity. Yet, every time the head was examined closely, it seemed to resist easy explanation. Its features were not Mesoamerican, not Toltec, not Aztec, not even remotely similar to Mayan artistry. Instead, art historians noted its resemblance to Roman work from the 2nd or 3rd century AD, and radiocarbon dating of the burial context confirmed the tomb itself belonged to that era, between 1476 and 1510, right before Spanish conquest. But even more striking, thermoluminescence tests on the head itself suggested it could date as far back as the 9th century AD, or earlier. Now imagine this, a Roman-style terracotta head, possibly over 1,000 years old, resting in a Mexican grave long before Columbus. This is not a legend, not a rumor, it's an actual artifact housed in the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, and its existence alone forces us to ask, did people from the Old World reach the New long before the age of exploration? Some suggest it might be proof of transoceanic contact. Perhaps a Roman ship, blown off course, reached the distant shores of the Americas. Or maybe traders carried Mediterranean goods farther than we realize, passing them through endless hands until the object crossed the ocean. Others say it could have been brought during the medieval period, carried by Vikings or other travelers, and then buried later. But even these explanations feel thin, because the head was not found loose, like an imported trinket. It was part of a burial, an object deliberately placed in the grave as if it meant something sacred to the people who buried it. And here's where the mystery deepens. If it was foreign, did the local people recognize it as foreign? Did they see in its strange features a divine presence, a face of another world? Or was it simply a curiosity, a beautiful relic from across unknown waters, carried into the afterlife as a prized possession? Every attempt to explain the head creates more questions than answers. If it truly is Roman, then how did it arrive in Mexico centuries before Columbus? If it is not Roman, then why does it look so convincingly Roman to experts in art history? And if it is a forgery, how could it have been planted in a scientifically controlled excavation in 1933, when no one stood to gain anything from such a strange discovery? Think of the possibilities. Perhaps forgotten voyages did occur. Perhaps sailors from the ancient Mediterranean world, blown westward by storms, reached lands they could not map and could not return from. Perhaps their stories were lost, their records buried, but small traces like this terracotta head remain. Some even connect the Tekaxic-Kalixtlahuaca head to the larger puzzle of pre-Columbian contact theories. The idea that civilizations across the oceans may have brushed against one another long before history acknowledges it. Norse voyages to Vinland are already accepted. Why not earlier attempts by Phoenicians, Carthaginians, or even Romans? Why couldn't a ship, lost on the vast Atlantic, find itself on the shores of the Americas, leaving behind fragments of its world? But skeptics push back. They argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. A single artifact, they say, is not enough. Maybe the head was a modern intrusion, somehow misplaced into the burial. Maybe it fell into the excavation through accident, or perhaps it was mixed with the soil in earlier centuries. They ask for more artifacts, more proof. Yet none have surfaced. Only this one head, sitting quietly in its museum case, refusing to answer. It is easy to see why some archaeologists prefer to ignore it. To accept it fully would be to rewrite enormous parts of history. It would force us to admit that ancient people crossed oceans in ways we cannot fully trace. It would open the possibility that the world was more connected, more interwoven than we ever imagined. And that kind of admission changes everything. So the Tekaxic-Kalixtlahuaca head rests in uneasy silence. A Roman face in the heart of Mexico, a riddle locked in terracotta. Neither proven nor disproven. Both ordinary and impossible. Picture it in your mind. A small head, about the size of your palm. Its eyes staring forward, its features carved with delicate care. It looks like something you might expect in a European archaeological display, perhaps dug from an Italian villa. And yet, here it is, buried beneath Mexican soil, centuries away from where it should belong. The mystery has not faded. Scholars still write about it. Writers still wonder about it. And those who see it for the first time always ask the same question: how? How did this little head travel across oceans and centuries to find its resting place in a grave far from home? And more importantly, what other stories lie hidden, waiting to be uncovered, that may force us to rethink everything we know about the ancient world? Perhaps this is only the beginning. Perhaps the head is just one clue, pointing to a much larger, forgotten chapter of human history. A chapter where oceans were not barriers but bridges, where people ventured farther than we ever dared to believe. The Tekaxic-Kalixtlahuaca head does not give us answers, but it reminds us that history is not fixed. It is alive, full of surprises, always capable of overturning what we thought we knew. And in that silence, in that uncertainty, lies the power of the mystery. The Baghdad skeletons. In the dusty heart of Iraq, not far from the banks of the Tigris, archaeologists uncovered something that should not have been there. Not tools, not pottery, but skeletons. Bones so old, yet so strange, that they whispered of something deeply unsettling about our ancient past. These were not ordinary burials, not neat graves with offerings, not royal tombs sealed with care. No, these were scattered remains, skeletons discovered in Baghdad's soil, hidden beneath layers of history, and when they came to light, they raised more questions than answers. At first glance, the discovery seemed simple: human skeletons. But the closer researchers looked, the stranger it became. Some of these skeletons appeared far too ancient to belong to the known history of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Some even carried features that didn't quite match with the people believed to have lived there thousands of years ago. Imagine digging in the ruins of a land once ruled by Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, and suddenly finding skeletons that look like they belong to another age, another place, or maybe another species. The bones were unusually large. In some reports, elongated skulls were mentioned, features that did not quite align with the populations known to have lived in Mesopotamia. And then there was the placement. Some skeletons were buried in ways that suggested rituals, or perhaps something darker. Archaeologists tried to classify them, but the deeper they studied, the more puzzling the evidence became. Were these skeletons part of an unknown culture, migrants from a distant land, or traces of something far stranger? Beings who lived in Mesopotamia long before recorded history even began. Think of Baghdad's significance. This is the very land where writing was born, the place where kings inscribed laws into stone, the land of ziggurats, of the Code of Hammurabi, of Gilgamesh himself. If skeletons that did not belong to these civilizations were found here, it meant one thing. Before the great cities, before the birth of history, something else was already there. Some researchers proposed that the skeletons belonged to a lost Mesopotamian tribe, erased from records. Others whispered of survivors from a forgotten catastrophe, people who lived underground or outside the reach of known history. But the most daring theories? They suggested these were not ordinary humans at all. Some thought they were evidence of a giant race, the kind of beings hinted at in ancient myths across the world, myths that speak of towering figures who walked the earth before mankind. Others suggested they could be visitors from afar, beings that did not originate in Mesopotamia, or perhaps even on Earth. Why? Because the skeletal features were not uniform. Some skulls appeared elongated. Others had jawlines and bone structures unlike typical Mesopotamian remains. Even the way they were buried was strange. Sometimes alone, sometimes grouped, sometimes almost carelessly thrown into the earth, as though they were not honored but discarded. This opens up chilling possibilities. Were these individuals outsiders, prisoners, victims of ritual sacrifice, or were they considered dangerous, unwanted by the ancient people who encountered them? The Baghdad skeletons sit in the same land where myths of ancient gods and demigods were first written. The Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of encounters with beings not entirely human. The Sumerian texts mention the Anunnaki, those who descended from the heavens, shaping mankind. Could the skeletons be remnants of these stories made flesh? Skeptics argue that nothing extraordinary is at play here. They say these were simply unusual burials, or that ancient Mesopotamia was a crossroads where different peoples mixed, producing skeletal remains that look unusual today. But even skeptics cannot explain why so many unanswered questions remain about the age, the features, and the placement of the bones. And so the mystery deepens. Ordinary explanations fall short, but myths, strangely enough, seem to fit. The Mesopotamian texts describe beings who came before. They speak of floods that wiped away earlier civilizations. They hint that not all humans today are the first humans to have lived in this land. Could these skeletons be the proof? Some believe so. They point to the layers of soil, suggesting the skeletons were older than expected, older than the rise of Sumer, older even than the first known villages in Mesopotamia. If true, then Baghdad hides more than just the ruins of known history. It hides the remains of a forgotten humanity. Picture it for a moment. Thousands of years ago, long before cities and kings, a different people lived here. Their bodies larger, their skulls longer, their customs unfamiliar. They thrived, and then they vanished, buried beneath the earth. And when the next civilization rose, their memory was erased. Only bones remained. But who were they? A lost tribe? A parallel humanity? Or something not human at all? The Baghdad skeletons sit quietly in the archives, rarely spoken of, often dismissed, yet never explained. Their mystery lingers because their very presence suggests we do not know our own story as well as we think. The cradle of civilization may not have been the beginning, but merely another chapter in a much older, much stranger human journey. When you think of Baghdad, you might think of history, of war, of empires long gone. But beneath all of that, beneath every stone and every ruined wall, are bones that do not fit. Bones that tell us something else was here before us, something forgotten, something erased. And that is the haunting truth of the Baghdad skeletons. They remain, even now, a reminder that beneath the surface of human history lies another story, one we were never meant to know. The Cascahal block script. There is a stone slab, unlike any other ever found in the Americas. At first glance it might look ordinary, just a flat block with markings scratched into its surface. But when archaeologists uncovered it near a small village in Veracruz, Mexico, it forced scholars to rethink everything they thought they knew about the beginnings of writing in the New World. This artifact is called the Cascahal block, and what it contains has puzzled linguists, historians, and archaeologists for decades. The block itself is small, not grand or towering like an Olmec head. It measures only about 36 centimeters long and 21 centimeters wide, weighing just under 12 kilograms. Yet the power of what is carved onto its surface is immense. Scratched into the stone are 62 symbols. Some look like plants, some look like insects, others resemble tools, corn, or abstract shapes, and the arrangement of these symbols suggests something far more than decoration. They appear to form a sequence, a deliberate pattern, possibly the earliest form of writing in the Americas. The Olmecs, who flourished from about 1500 to 400 BCE, are often referred to as the mother culture of Mesoamerica. They were the precursors to the Maya, the Aztec, and many other civilizations. Their colossal stone heads are famous worldwide. But what the Cascajal block represents is different. It suggests that the Olmecs may have had a written language centuries before the Maya developed their hieroglyphics. If true, this would make the Olmecs not just a foundational culture, but the very inventors of writing in the Americas. And yet, the mystery is deep, because we cannot read it. Despite decades of study, the symbols on the block have resisted all attempts at decipherment. Scholars cannot agree on whether the script is phonetic, logographic, or symbolic. Some believe it could be an early attempt at writing, where ideas were recorded instead of spoken language. Others argue it is a complete writing system, one that has simply been lost because so few examples survived. The frustrating truth is that the Cascajal block is unique. No other artifact has been found with the same symbols in the same sequence. Without more examples, it is nearly impossible to unlock its meaning. That is what makes the block so haunting. It gives us a glimpse into a language, a system of communication that may have vanished forever. Imagine an entire civilization with its own way of recording history, its own methods of capturing stories, rituals, and laws. And now all of it may be reduced to a single slab of stone, a fragment of memory carved into rock, a voice we can see but cannot hear. The context of its discovery adds even more layers of intrigue. The block was unearthed in 1999 by road builders working near the village of Lomas de Tacamachapa in the Mexican state of Veracruz. It wasn't found in a ceremonial center, a tomb, or a pyramid, but buried among construction debris. This raised immediate questions. How did it get there? Was it discarded? Was it buried intentionally? Could it have been part of a larger archive that has long since been destroyed? Scholars immediately began to debate its authenticity. Could it be a modern forgery? The symbols were unlike anything seen before in known Olmec art, but tests on the stone, the weathering of the carvings, and the archaeological context all suggested authenticity. Eventually, most experts accepted that the Cascajal block was genuine. But authenticity only deepened the puzzle. Because the Olmecs were never thought to have developed writing, until the block appeared, scholars believed that true writing in the Americas began with the Zapotec or Maya centuries later. The block forces us to ask whether the Olmecs were far more advanced than we thought, or whether other pieces of their written tradition simply remain undiscovered. Think of what this means. If the Olmecs had writing, then their culture was recording laws, trade, religion, and history long before the Maya. It suggests a sophistication that goes beyond monumental heads and ceremonial centers. It implies that the Olmecs were not only artists and builders but philosophers and chroniclers. They were capable of abstract thought, of encoding language into symbols. They were, in short, more like us than we imagined. But here is the unsettling part. What if this block is all that is left? What if entire libraries of Olmec writing once existed, written on perishable materials like bark, paper, or cloth, and they simply rotted away in the humid jungles of Veracruz? The stone could be the last survivor of an entire lost archive, a single page torn from a vanished book. That thought lingers. How much knowledge can vanish without a trace? Scholars who have studied the block have noticed patterns. Some symbols repeat in ways that resemble grammar, some appear in pairs, others at the beginning or end of sequences. This suggests structure, but is it a record of rituals, a calendar, a list of rulers, or something entirely different? Without a bilingual key, like the Rosetta Stone was for Egyptian hieroglyphs, we may never know, and no such key has ever been found for the Olmec script. Another possibility adds to the intrigue. What if the block is not Olmec at all, but from a different, unknown culture that lived alongside them? Could there have been another civilization, one that coexisted with the Olmecs but left almost no trace? The Cascajal block may not just be a mystery of language, it may be evidence of a hidden people, one erased from history except for a single carved stone, and still, the block resists answers. Decade after decade, the same questions remain. Was this truly the first writing of the Americas? Was it a full writing system, or merely a proto-script? Was it Olmec, or was it something else entirely? Each interpretation opens more doors than it closes. Even the symbols themselves stir debate. Some resemble maize, which was central to Mesoamerican life. Others resemble insects or tools. Are these literal images, or do they stand for sounds, like an alphabet? One symbol looks like a throne. Could this mean kingship, or authority, or ritual? Another looks like a fish. Was this about food, trade, or religion? Each carving feels alive, yet frozen, waiting for a reader who may never come. It is also possible that the block is not meant to be read in the way we imagine. Maybe it wasn't a narrative, or a list. Maybe it was magical, a spell, a charm, a sacred inscription meant to be seen but not spoken. If so, it may never have been intended for human eyes at all, but for gods, ancestors, or spirits. That possibility reminds us that writing is not only practical, it can also be sacred, mysterious, and esoteric. Today, the Cascahal block is kept safe, studied, and guarded. Scholars from across the world come to examine it. Each brings new theories, new comparisons, new methods of analysis. Some apply computer models, trying to detect hidden structures in the sequences. Others compare the symbols with known Olmec art. But for now, the block remains stubborn. It whispers, but it does not speak. And so the Cascahal block stands as one of the most frustrating and fascinating puzzles of the ancient world. A small stone that could rewrite the history of writing in the Americas. A text that cannot be read. A voice that cannot be heard. A reminder of how much has been lost, and how fragile human memory really is. The Olmecs themselves vanished long ago, their cities abandoned, their monuments left to the jungle. What remains of them are colossal heads, fragments of pottery, and now this block. Perhaps somewhere still buried beneath the soil of Veracruz, more stones wait to be discovered. Perhaps an entire library lies hidden. Or perhaps this single block is all we will ever have. It is enough to remind us that history is not a straight line, it is a shattered mirror. Sometimes we see reflections, sometimes only fragments. The Cascahal block is one such fragment. It tells us the Olmecs, or whoever carved it, had a system of meaning deeper than we once believed. But it keeps its meaning hidden, leaving us with more questions than answers. And that is why it haunts archaeologists. Because sometimes the greatest discoveries are not the ones that explain, but the ones that refuse to explain. They sit in museums, they rest in our imagination, and they remind us that the past is still full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. The Cascahal block is one of them. A single stone that may hold the earliest voice of the Americas, a voice carved in silence, a voice we may never hear. The Laladoff plate. The story of the Laladoff plate begins quietly, like so many of the most puzzling discoveries in history. In 1947, deep in the rugged mountains of Tibet, a small circular stone plate came into the hands of a European ethnologist named Laladoff. The artifact appeared ordinary at first glance, something that could have been dismissed as a simple decorative object. But on closer examination, the surface revealed engravings unlike anything scholars had seen before. The patterns were precise, geometric, and in the very center of the plate was an unmistakable figure, one that looked astonishingly similar to what we would call a flying saucer. Imagine holding this stone in your hands, its surface smoothed by time, carved with deliberate shapes that seem to speak of meaning lost to the ages. The Laladoff plate is not just mysterious, it is controversial. For decades, it has raised questions about whether ancient cultures, isolated from one another, might have shared contact with something far beyond what mainstream history allows. The plate's carvings are where the intrigue deepens. Around the central saucer-like figure are spirals, dots, and humanoid forms. Some researchers interpret the spirals as representations of movement or energy, suggesting that the central object was meant to be seen as hovering, alive with force. Others see the humanoid figures as stylized depictions of people, or perhaps beings that were not entirely human. If that sounds like imagination running wild, consider this. Throughout the ancient world, across cultures that supposedly had no contact, we find artwork and stories of sky beings, luminous craft, and gods descending from the heavens. The Laladoff plate joins this long tradition, standing as a physical artifact that cannot easily be dismissed as myth or misinterpretation. Skeptics, of course, argue otherwise. They claim the plate could have been created much more recently, perhaps even in the modern era, as a hoax or a symbolic piece of art that people later misinterpreted. They point out the lack of definitive archaeological context. The plate was not discovered in a sealed tomb or a clear stratigraphic layer, but instead surfaced in the hands of a collector. And in archaeology, context is everything. Without it, dating becomes uncertain, and authenticity can always be questioned. But there's a counterpoint to consider. Not every artifact comes neatly packaged in context. Many of history's most fascinating objects were found by chance, in caves, in fields, passed down through families before scholars recognized their value. To dismiss the Laladoff plate outright is to close the door on the possibility that it may represent something authentic, something that challenges the framework of history we've built. When studying the plate, some researchers have compared it to another set of controversial artifacts, the Drapa stones. Discovered in the 1930s, also in a remote part of China near Tibet. These discs were carved with spiral grooves, some said to contain microscopic inscriptions. The Drapa stones themselves are wrapped in doubt, with debates raging over their authenticity, but the parallels between them and the Laladoff plate are hard to ignore. Both involve circular stone discs, both feature spirals, and both are connected to regions rich in legend about sky visitors and advanced beings. Could it be coincidence? Or are we looking at fragments of a larger story, scattered across time and geography? What makes the Laladov plate even more enigmatic is that it is not isolated in Tibetan lore. For centuries, Tibetan and Himalayan traditions have contained stories of beings who descended from the heavens. These stories are woven into their myths, their art, and their religious symbolism. In Buddhist teachings, the concept of beings traveling across worlds is not unusual, and in Tibetan folklore, tales of luminous discs or wheels in the sky are recorded with reverence. The plate, then, might not be an outlier, but a physical representation of stories deeply ingrained in the culture. Now imagine this. It is the late Stone Age, or perhaps even later, in some remote village in Tibet. The night sky above the mountains is filled with stars, unpolluted by modern lights. The people of the land look up, night after night, at the movements of the heavens. And then one night, something different happens. A luminous disk, glowing and silent, descends across the ridges of the peaks. For them, it would not be a technological event. It would be a divine one. Such an encounter could live on in myth, in legend, or perhaps in carving. The Laladov plate, carved by human hands, could be the memory of that moment etched into stone. But how old is it really? That's a question we still cannot answer with certainty. Without carbon dating or context, we rely on stylistic comparisons, and those are open to interpretation. Some scholars say the engravings resemble Neolithic art. Others argue they could be much later, perhaps even as recent as a few hundred years ago. The range is wide, and that very uncertainty is part of what fuels the mystery. The debate does not end there. The presence of the saucer-like figure is what drives much of the controversy. In the mid-20th century, when UFO phenomena became widely reported, people naturally began projecting those modern images onto older objects. Was the Laladov plate a genuine ancient artifact depicting a flying saucer, or was it simply an abstract design that we, in hindsight, interpret with our own cultural biases? This is the danger and the fascination of studying the past. Our minds want to connect the dots. We want meaning, and in seeking it, we sometimes see patterns that may not have been intended. Yet other times, patterns we dismiss as coincidence turn out to be real connections that reveal entire lost chapters of history. What if the Laladov plate truly is a window into a forgotten encounter? If so, then its implications ripple across our understanding of human history. It would suggest that ancient cultures, even in remote regions, were witnesses to phenomena we still struggle to explain today. It would suggest that the legends of sky beings were not just imagination, but memory. Consider also the craftsmanship of the plate. Stone carving requires effort, patience, and purpose. People did not carve stone discs with complex symbols for no reason. Every line, every spiral, every figure carried significance to those who made it. If the central figure was meant to depict a flying disc, then it must have been important enough to remember, to preserve in stone. As you think about the Laladov plate, you may begin to notice how many such anomalies exist across the world, each one small, isolated, but together forming a tapestry of mystery. The Nazca lines in Peru, which can only be appreciated from above. The ancient Sumerian carvings that depict star maps. The Dogon tribe of Africa, with knowledge of stars invisible to the naked eye. Again and again, fragments appear that suggest our ancestors had contact, knowledge, or experiences beyond what our textbooks tell us. Is the Laladov plate one more piece of this hidden puzzle? Perhaps we will never know for certain. What we can say is that it continues to spark wonder, debate, and curiosity. For decades, it has been quietly discussed in alternative history circles, a reminder that sometimes the smallest objects can raise the biggest questions. As you picture it now, a small circular plate, carved with spirals, humanoids, and what appears to be a saucer, you can let your mind drift into the possibilities. Was it a memory of a real encounter? Was it art meant to symbolize something spiritual? Or was it, as skeptics say, a modern creation that fooled collectors? The answers remain hidden. But in the end, the Laladov plate serves its greatest purpose, not by providing answers, but by keeping alive the questions. It reminds us that human history is not a closed book. It is a story with missing chapters, with pages torn out, and with mysteries waiting to be rediscovered, and sometimes, a single carved stone can make us wonder about everything we thought we knew. The Keeladai pottery script. Beneath the quiet soil of Tamil Nadu, in the village of Keeladai, an ancient voice waited for centuries to be heard. What began as an ordinary excavation soon revealed fragments that would shake the timelines of history. These were not simple shards of clay. These were scripts etched into pottery, markings that whispered of literacy, trade, and cultural brilliance long before historians believed it had ever existed in this region. The Keeladai site first gained attention in 2015, when archaeologists unearthed layers of settlement buried along the banks of the Vaigai River. What they found was extraordinary. an urban center thriving nearly 2,500 years ago, with brick structures, wells, drainage systems, ornaments, and most curiously, pottery with writing. The marks carved onto these pieces were not random scratches. They carried patterns, symbols, and sequences that suggested a structured language. And here begins the rhythm of the mystery. Clay turns to script turns to story, and story turns to silence. A silence that echoes louder than words. For decades, the origin of writing in South India has been tied to the Brahmi script, thought to have emerged in the 3rd century BCE under the influence of Ashoka's inscriptions. But the Keeladai pottery fragments push the timeline further back. Some scholars argue they belong to as early as the 6th century BCE, at least 300 years older than the earliest Brahmi. If true, it suggests that the people of this region were literate before the Mauryan influence, challenging the accepted history of Indian scripts. Imagine this. In the dim glow of oil lamps, a potter carves lines into wet clay, not knowing his work will outlive him by millennia. The vessel is fired, used, broken, and buried. Centuries later, we stumble upon the fragments and struggle to read the lines. Was it a name, a prayer, an account of trade? Or perhaps an entire philosophy condensed into symbols? The rhythm returns. Clay holds the word holds the thought holds the people, and the people vanish. Some researchers suggest these inscriptions were early Tamil Brahmi. Others say they predate it entirely, forming a bridge between Indus Valley symbols and later scripts. If the second view holds true, Keeladai might be a missing link, connecting the ancient Harappans of the north to the Sangam-era Tamil culture of the south. The excavation revealed more than writing. Beads made of semi-precious stones, spindle whorls, ornaments of shell and ivory, and even traces of textile weaving were found. These discoveries indicate a thriving, sophisticated community, engaged in craft, trade, and possibly long-distance connections. But the pottery script remains the beating heart of the mystery. Every shard is like a syllable, every mark, a letter, every silence between them, a pause in the rhythm of history. Some symbols resemble those found in northern India, while others appear unique to the region. Was there a shared cultural exchange, or were these scripts born independently? The debate grows more complex because we cannot fully decipher them yet. Without translation, the meaning slips through our fingers like sand, and yet the rhythm does not end. Pottery broken, script unspoken, history awoken. The Keeladai findings also suggest literacy was not limited to elites or rulers. The widespread nature of these artifacts hints at a society where common people might have engaged with writing. Inscriptions on household pottery suggest that literacy was not confined to stone monuments or royal decrees. It was part of everyday life. This challenges the notion that writing in the ancient world was rare and restricted. Still, questions linger. Who taught them? Did this script evolve locally, or was it influenced by traders from the Mediterranean or Middle East? Was it connected to the long-lost Indus script, whose meaning remains hidden even today? Or was it an entirely new invention of the Tamil people, carrying the seeds of one of the world's longest continuous linguistic traditions? The rhythm grows deeper, language buried, culture carried, secrets married. Even today, Tamil is recognized as one of the oldest living languages in the world, with a continuous history spanning over 2,000 years. Could the Keeladai inscriptions be proof that its roots run even deeper, into a forgotten past where words carved on clay carried the voice of an ancient civilization? The soil of Keeladai has not given up all its secrets. Excavations continue, each season adding a fragment to the puzzle, yet the mystery remains unsolved. The marks on those potsherds refuse to reveal their complete story. They sit in museums and laboratories, waiting for the day when someone will finally read them, not as symbols but as words. Until then, we listen to the rhythm: broken clay, unbroken voice, lost letters, found silence. Keeladai speaks, but only in whispers, and those whispers invite us to imagine an India far older, far more literate, and far more advanced than we have ever been taught. The mystery of Quimbaya airplanes. In the lush lands of Colombia, long before Europeans set foot in the Americas, the Quimbaya civilization thrived. Known for their extraordinary craftsmanship in gold, they left behind a legacy of artifacts that still puzzle archaeologists and engineers alike. Among their most astonishing creations is a group of small golden objects, no larger than a few inches, that bear a striking resemblance to modern airplanes. These pieces, often referred to as the Quimbaya airplanes, are some of the most hotly debated artifacts in the field of ancient mysteries. The story begins with the discovery of several tombs belonging to the Quimbaya culture, which flourished around 300 to 1000 CE. When archaeologists excavated these burial sites, they found an array of golden treasures, jewelry, ceremonial objects, and figurines. But among them were about a dozen small gold models that seemed unlike anything else. Their shapes did not resemble birds, insects, or fish in the traditional artistic style of the Quimbaya. Instead, their forms looked aerodynamic, complete with wings, stabilizers, and tails that bore an uncanny resemblance to modern aircraft. To a casual observer, these pieces could be mistaken for stylized birds, but to engineers and pilots who later examined them, the resemblance to airplanes was undeniable. Some of the artifacts even appeared to have vertical stabilizers at the rear, something no bird has, but every airplane does. The mystery deepened in the 20th century when aeronautical engineers began testing the design of the Quimbaya models. Scaled-up replicas were built with modern materials and tested in wind tunnels. To the astonishment of researchers, the models exhibited stable flight characteristics. They were not just random shapes, they followed the basic principles of aerodynamics. In fact, when modified slightly with engines and propellers, replicas of the Quimbaya designs were able to fly. This discovery fueled debates among scholars, skeptics, and enthusiasts alike. Could the Quimbaya people, over 1,000 years ago, have had knowledge of flight? Were these models symbolic representations of something they had witnessed? Or were they purely artistic creations that coincidentally mirrored modern aircraft? Mainstream archaeology suggests that the Quimbaya artifacts are likely stylized depictions of insects or birds, reflecting the culture's artistic creativity rather than technical knowledge of aviation. The unusual features, like vertical stabilizers, are explained as artistic flourishes. But this explanation does not satisfy everyone. The precision of the designs, their aerodynamic properties, and the number of artifacts discovered suggest a pattern that is hard to dismiss as coincidence. Some theorists propose that the Quimbaya may have had contact with an advanced civilization, either an unknown culture lost to history or something more otherworldly. Ancient astronaut theorists point to these artifacts as evidence of extraterrestrial influence, arguing that the Quimbaya crafted what they saw. If they had witnessed flying machines, whether human-made or alien, it might explain why their golden models bear such striking resemblance to aircraft. Others suggest that the models represent a forgotten knowledge of flight within ancient civilizations. After all, humanity has a long history of fascination with the skies. Cultures across the world, from the ancient Egyptians to the Hindus with their texts describing flying vimanas, have left behind stories of aerial vehicles. Could the Quimbaya airplanes be another piece of that puzzle? What makes the Quimbaya artifacts especially compelling is their durability. Made of solid gold, they were not functional toys, but ceremonial or symbolic objects. Their inclusion in tombs suggests they had spiritual or ritual significance. If they were meant to represent birds or insects, why not make them look more naturalistic, as the Quimbaya did with other animal depictions? Why choose a design so mechanical, so aerodynamic, and so different from the natural world? The mystery continues to spark debates. Some engineers argue that the designs are too precise to be accidental. The existence of a vertical tail fin, which stabilizes airplanes during flight, is a feature unknown in birds or insects, yet the Quimbaya included it. Others counter that humans often find familiar shapes in abstract art, a phenomenon known as pareidolia. In other words, we see airplanes in these objects because we want to see them. Still, the fact that scaled-up models of the Quimbaya airplanes can actually fly cannot be ignored. It raises an unsettling possibility that our ancestors knew more than we give them credit for. Either through observation of something extraordinary, or through knowledge passed down from forgotten sources, they captured the essence of flight in gold long before modern aviation was even dreamed of. For those who study ancient mysteries, the Quimbaya airplanes serve as a reminder of how little we truly understand about the past. Were these objects symbolic offerings to gods of the sky? Were they memories of something witnessed long ago? Or are they simply beautiful works of art that coincidentally resemble technology thousands of years ahead of their time? The Quimbaya civilization eventually faded, their culture swallowed by the passage of centuries. Yet their golden artifacts endure, still gleaming as brightly as the day they were crafted, still whispering questions to those who look closely. Whether they are echoes of advanced knowledge, remnants of contact with others, or simply enigmatic art, they remain among the most mysterious creations of the ancient world. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not the artifacts themselves, but the silence of history that surrounds them. We may never know what the Quimbaya people truly intended when they shaped those golden forms. But the mere possibility that they may have glimpsed the skies in ways we cannot fully explain ensures that their legacy will never be forgotten. Chachapoya cloud mummies. High in the remote cloud forests of northern Peru lies one of the strangest and most haunting mysteries of the ancient world. Here, where the mountains scrape against drifting mists and rain-soaked cliffs overlook deep valleys, the Chachapoya civilization once thrived. They were known as the Cloud People because they built their settlements high above the ground, often hidden within the foggy ridges of the Andes. But what they left behind continues to puzzle archaeologists and captivate all who hear their story. Human mummies, preserved for centuries in precarious cliffside tombs, staring down at the world from impossible heights. Imagine walking along a narrow mountain trail and suddenly seeing human figures gazing out from a sheer rock wall. Their faces are painted, their bodies wrapped, and their hollow eyes seem to pierce through the mist. These are the cloud mummies of the Chachapoya. Unlike the better-known mummies of Egypt, which were carefully buried in desert tombs, the Chachapoya dead were placed inside sarcophagi perched on vertical cliffs. Many were sealed inside stone chambers with wooden or clay coffins shaped like human figures, while others were bundled in textiles and placed in caves. From their lofty positions, the mummies seemed to serve as eternal guardians of the land, watching over valleys and rivers below. The question that lingers is, why did they do this? Was it a spiritual belief, a way to bring their ancestors closer to the gods who lived among the clouds? Or was it to keep the spirits of the dead looking down upon their descendants, protecting the living from above? The Chachapoya were a mysterious people long before the Inca ever rose to dominate Peru. The Inca themselves spoke of them with a mixture of respect and awe. According to chroniclers, the Chachapoya were fierce warriors, tall in stature, and skilled builders who carved settlements into hard-to-reach places. Their architecture included stone fortresses like Kulap, sometimes called the Machu Picchu of the north. Unlike other Andean civilizations, however, much about the Chachapoya remains obscure because they left no written records. Their story must be pieced together from ruins, artifacts, and the haunting presence of their mummies. In 1928, archaeologists exploring the Utacubamba Valley came upon something extraordinary, a series of sarcophagi set into a cliff face, seemingly defying gravity. Each sarcophagus stood upright, nearly as tall as a person, painted in red and white, with faces sculpted at the top. They became known as the Purun Machos, giant, eerie statues that contained the remains of Chachapoya ancestors. From a distance they looked like sentinels keeping silent watch, as if guarding sacred secrets against intruders. The placement of these sarcophagi raises many questions. How did the Chachapoya manage to transport heavy human remains, coffins, and building materials up sheer cliffs without modern equipment? Even today, reaching some of these tombs requires ropes, harnesses, and climbing gear. The idea that an ancient civilization was able to scale such heights regularly, carrying their dead, is astonishing. It suggests not only engineering skill, but also a worldview where the boundary between life and death was linked with the heights of the clouds. Equally intriguing is the preservation of the mummies themselves. Unlike Egyptian mummies, which were dried and embalmed through a deliberate process, many Chachapoya mummies were preserved naturally by the dry mountain air and sealed conditions of their tombs. Some are still wrapped in intricate textiles decorated with patterns, while others retain traces of painted designs on their faces. Their preservation seems almost accidental, yet profoundly effective, allowing the cloud people to remain visible long after their civilization disappeared. But the mystery deepens when considering the rituals behind these burials. Did the Chachapoya believe their ancestors needed to be close to the sky in order to reach the gods? Or did they think that placing the dead so high would prevent enemies from disturbing them? There is also the possibility that these towering tombs were intended to awe and intimidate outsiders, sending the message that their ancestors were always watching. Archaeologists have noted something else unusual. Not all Chachapoya mummies are found in sarcophagi. Some were placed in small, hidden caves, sitting upright in bundles, often alongside offerings of pottery, food, and ornaments. This suggests a variety of burial practices, perhaps depending on status, lineage, or role in the community. Some of the mummies appear to have been revisited by their descendants, as though the living would return to consult or honor them. This idea echoes traditions in other ancient cultures, where ancestors were not simply gone but continued to play an active role in the world of the living. Yet the greatest mystery is what became of the Chachapoya themselves. By the time the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, the Chachapoya had already been conquered by the Inca, their culture absorbed, and their people scattered. Disease and warfare devastated their numbers, and their once thriving civilization faded into obscurity. Today, their descendants still live in northern Peru, but the secrets of their ancestors' practices are largely forgotten. The mummies remain as silent witnesses to a past that was never written down. Standing before these cliffside tombs, one can't help but feel both awe and unease. The painted faces of the sarcophagi seem alive, their watchful gaze unbroken by centuries. The cloud mummies carry with them an air of timelessness, reminding us that death, for the Chachapoya, was not an ending but a continuation, a presence that lingered among the clouds, watching, guiding, and perhaps even warning. The discovery of the cloud mummies has also raised another question that is rarely discussed. Could there be more hidden tombs waiting to be found, sealed away in inaccessible cliffsides? Many valleys in northern Peru remain unexplored, their caves untouched. Archaeologists believe countless mummies may still rest unseen, their existence known only to the mountains and the clouds. Every new discovery about the Chachapoya seems to lead to further mysteries. Why did they vanish so quickly after Inca conquest? Why did they choose such dangerous burial methods? And what do their haunting cliffside mummies truly represent? Perhaps the Chachapoya believed that life and death were not separate, but joined in a cycle that forever connected earth, sky, and ancestor. When you picture these mummies, high above the misty valleys, you begin to understand the sense of reverence and mystery they left behind. They are more than preserved bodies. They are echoes of a culture that lived in harmony with the heights, that embraced the clouds as their eternal home. The cloud mummies of the Chachapoya remind us that human history is filled with ways of understanding life, death, and the beyond that differ profoundly from our own. They are a haunting testament to the imagination, belief, and determination of a people who lived and died among the clouds, leaving behind one of the most breathtaking mysteries of the ancient world, the Tiwanaku Gate of the Sun. In the high plains of Bolivia, near the desolate expanse of Lake Titicaca, lies one of the most enigmatic monuments ever crafted by ancient hands. It is a massive stone gateway, carved from a single block of andesite, standing silent and weathered against the winds of the Altiplano. Known as the Gate of the Sun, this megalith sits in the ruins of Tiwanaku, a city so old that many archaeologists believe it predates most known civilizations in South America. The structure itself is imposing yet puzzling. The gateway measures over 9 feet tall and 13 feet wide, its frame precisely cut, the surfaces smoothed with a skill that suggests advanced stonemasonry far beyond what should have been possible for the people of that time. The stone alone weighs several tons, yet it rests in the middle of an ancient complex without any clear explanation of how it was moved, placed, or even carved with such accuracy. The most mysterious feature, however, is not the size or craftsmanship, but the intricate carvings etched across its upper surface. At the center is a figure often called the staff god, depicted with rays extending from its head and holding objects in its hands. Surrounding this deity are rows of smaller winged figures, some with human faces, others with bird-like characteristics. To modern eyes, the imagery appears almost like a coded message, a celestial calendar, or perhaps a record of myths that have long since been forgotten. Some researchers have proposed that the Gate of the Sun was an ancient astronomical device. The patterns carved into the stone are believed to align with solar cycles, mapping solstices, equinoxes, and perhaps even lunar phases. If true, it would mean that the people of Tiwanaku were not only builders but also skilled astronomers who tracked the heavens with remarkable precision. Others suggest the carvings represent a complex calendar system, one that might have been used to predict agricultural cycles or ceremonial dates. But what makes the gate even more intriguing is the mystery of Tiwanaku itself. The city, now in ruins, once thrived at an altitude of over 12,000 feet, an environment where farming is extremely difficult, and yet the Tiwanaku civilization flourished here, creating advanced irrigation systems, terraced fields, and monumental stone structures. The sheer scale of their engineering has led some to wonder whether they possessed knowledge that has since been lost, or whether they inherited their skills from an even earlier, unknown culture. The Gate of the Sun may once have been part of a much larger structure. Today it stands alone, leaning slightly, as though it were displaced long ago by some great force. Earthquakes, invasions, or natural disasters may have shifted it from its original position. If it was once an entrance to a temple or ceremonial complex, the rest of that structure is now gone, leaving the gateway as a lone survivor of a vanished world. Legends among the indigenous Aymara people speak of Tiwanaku as a place built by giants, beings who walked the earth in an age before ordinary humans. According to these stories, the Gate of the Sun was connected to the gods themselves, a threshold between this world and the realm of the divine. Whether these are myths meant to explain the inexplicable, or echoes of some forgotten memory, remains unknown. Modern archaeologists continue to study the gate and the city around it, but many questions remain unanswered. Who exactly built it? What purpose did the carving serve? Was it truly an astronomical calendar, or something far more symbolic, perhaps even spiritual? And most importantly, why did this civilization collapse, leaving behind stone ruins, but little else to explain their existence? Standing before the Gate of the Sun today, visitors often feel a sense of timelessness, as if the stone itself holds secrets that refuse to be spoken. It is not merely a relic of the past, but a silent witness to a story that may stretch back tens of thousands of years, far beyond what our textbooks have yet uncovered. The gate remains, carved from a single massive stone, still bearing the marks of tools and hands that no one can fully explain. Whether it was a calendar, a portal of worship, or a symbol of cosmic knowledge, its presence is undeniable. The Gate of the Sun is more than just an artifact. It is a puzzle, a reminder that even at the roof of the world, ancient people left behind mysteries that challenge everything we think we know about human history. The mystery of Chavin Lanson. Deep in the Peruvian Andes lies the archaeological site of Chavin de Huantar, a place that was once a powerful ceremonial and cultural center thousands of years ago. At its heart stands one of the most enigmatic artifacts of ancient South America, the lanzón. Hidden deep inside a labyrinth of underground passages, the lanzón is a massive granite monolith, carved with extraordinary detail, rising more than 15 feet tall. To the people of Chavin, this was no ordinary stone, it was the centerpiece of their spiritual world, a mysterious object that still puzzles archaeologists and historians to this day. The lanzón depicts a deity with both human and animal features, a figure that seems to blend the earthly with the supernatural. Its face bears fierce fangs, and its hands grasp scepters, symbols of authority. Its eyes are wide, intense, and almost hypnotic, as though meant to pull anyone who gazes upon it into a trance. Some scholars suggest this godlike image represented a creator deity, one that could cross between realms, connecting the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. What makes the lanzón even more mysterious is its placement. It was deliberately set in a hidden chamber, accessible only through narrow tunnels and passageways. It wasn't meant to be seen by all, it was reserved for initiates, priests, and those chosen to undergo transformative rituals. Imagine walking through the dimly lit stone corridors of Chavin with the sound of water flowing from underground canals echoing around you, until you arrive in the chamber where the lanzón towers before you. For those who entered, the experience must have been overwhelming, almost otherworldly. Researchers believe that the Chavin priests may have used hallucinogenic plants during ceremonies, heightening the visions and creating an altered state of perception. In such a state, staring into the fierce face of the lanzón would not simply be looking at stone, it would feel as if the deity itself was alive, speaking, and exerting its power over the initiate. The underground architecture even seems designed to amplify sound and disorient the senses, making the experience even more mystical. The carvings on the lanzón are also an intricate puzzle. The images are deliberately complex, filled with twisting lines, dualities, and shapes that blend into one another. At first glance, you might see only a figure, but as your eyes adjust, more details appear. Serpents, claws, wings, and supernatural features layered within the design. Some believe this was intentional, a form of visual code meant only for those trained to read its hidden meanings. Despite centuries of study, the exact purpose of the lanzón remains unclear. Was it an oracle, where priests spoke on behalf of the deity? Was it a symbol of unifying power, a way to bind together people from across the Andes under one spiritual order? Or was it a representation of cosmic balance, a link between dualities, day and night, life and death, order and chaos? The Chavin culture thrived between 900 and 200 BCE, long before the Inca Empire rose to prominence. Yet their ideas spread across vast regions of South America, influencing countless societies that followed. And at the center of that influence was the lanzón, the sacred monolith, hidden away in stone chambers, silently carrying its mysteries through time. Even now, standing before it, modern visitors can feel its strange pull. Its presence is commanding, timeless, and still charged with an energy that defies explanation. The lanzón is not just a relic of the past, it is a window into how ancient people viewed the cosmos, the divine, and their place in the world. And as much as archaeologists analyze it, as many theories as are proposed, one thing remains certain: the lanzón was never meant to reveal its secrets easily. It was carved to be eternal, enigmatic, and to keep its mysteries locked within stone, the Ica stones. In the arid deserts of Peru, near the small city of Ica, lies one of the strangest and most controversial mysteries ever uncovered. It is not a lost city, nor a ruined temple, but rather a vast collection of engraved stones, thousands of them, each bearing strange images that seem far too advanced, too unusual, and too contradictory to what mainstream history tells us about ancient civilizations. These artifacts are known as the Ica stones, and to this day, they remain a puzzle without a clear answer. The story begins in the 1960s, when a Peruvian physician named Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquea received a small engraved stone as a gift. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a curiosity, a rock with an unusual carving etched into its surface. But the more he studied it, the more he realized there was something different about it. The images were not random scratches, they depicted something intentional, something sophisticated. That first stone sparked Cabrera's fascination, and soon he began collecting more. By the time he devoted his life to this work, his collection had grown to over 11,000 engraved stones, each with strange and baffling images that did not fit comfortably into any timeline of human history. The stones themselves are smooth and dark, mostly made from andesite, a type of hard volcanic rock. What is remarkable is not the material, but what is carved onto them. Some stones show ordinary scenes, people hunting, fishing, or engaging in daily life. But others show things far more extraordinary. There are images of what appear to be dinosaurs, long-necked sauropods, and creatures resembling Triceratops or Stegosaurus, animals that according to modern science went extinct millions of years before humans ever existed. On other stones, one finds depictions of advanced surgeries, brain transplants, heart operations, and even organ transplants, etched with incredible detail, as if the artist was familiar with medical practices that should not have existed in ancient Peru. Perhaps most controversially, some stones depict what looks like astronomical knowledge. There are maps of the stars, figures gazing through what resemble telescopes, and scenes that suggest travel to other worlds. In some depictions, humans seem to ride on the backs of dinosaurs or interact with them as if they coexisted. To someone seeing these for the first time, the engravings challenge everything we are taught about history. How could such images exist? Were these ancient people recording events that truly happened? Or were they imagining myths and legends that simply look strange to us today? Dr. Cabrera himself became convinced that the Ica stones were evidence of a lost, advanced civilization that existed long before recorded history. He believed these stones were a kind of library, left behind by an ancient people with knowledge of medicine, astronomy, and biology far beyond their time. He even suggested that these people might have lived alongside dinosaurs, or at the very least, had knowledge of creatures that science insists disappeared millions of years earlier. However, mainstream archaeologists and historians did not share his enthusiasm. From the moment the Ica stones became public, they were surrounded by accusations of fraud. Some locals admitted to carving fake stones to sell to tourists, claiming they invented the images with knives and tools. This fueled the skepticism, and many dismissed the entire collection as nothing more than an elaborate hoax. But the debate is not so easily resolved. The problem lies in the sheer scale of the collection. Tens of thousands of stones exist, and many display a level of artistry that is not easy to dismiss as quick tourist souvenirs. Some carvings are deeply etched into the volcanic rock, requiring tools that would be difficult to work with using primitive methods. Furthermore, some stones were discovered in archaeological contexts, buried in ancient graves, or unearthed from layers of soil that predated modern forgeries. If all of the Ica stones were fakes, it would have required an enormous, coordinated effort by multiple people over many decades, something that seems unlikely. Another complication is the subject matter itself. Why would forgers in rural Peru choose to carve dinosaurs and advanced surgical techniques, instead of more familiar and marketable designs like llamas, condors, or traditional Inca symbols? Why would they imagine organ transplants or telescopes, concepts that seem more aligned with modern science fiction than with ancient legends? The sheer strangeness of the images makes the hoax explanation less satisfying, even if some examples were clearly manufactured. Researchers have tried to analyze the carvings for authenticity. Some examinations showed that the engravings bore signs of age, oxidation, patina, and wear that suggested they were not freshly made. Others argued that the patina could be artificially created. In the end, scientific studies have not provided a definitive answer. The stones remain in a limbo between dismissed fraud and unresolved mystery. What is perhaps most fascinating about the Ica stones is not whether every single one is authentic, but the possibility that even a portion of them might be genuine. If even a fraction of the collection is truly ancient, then humanity's understanding of history would need to be rewritten. The images of dinosaurs would suggest that humans witnessed creatures thought to have died out millions of years ago. The surgical depictions would imply advanced medical knowledge in a culture that should not have possessed such skills. The astronomical scenes would hint at a civilization with a far deeper awareness of the universe than mainstream history allows. Dr. Cabrera believed he was preserving the memory of this forgotten civilization, one that may have existed tens of thousands of years before the rise of Egypt or Mesopotamia. He considered the Ica stones to be a warning, a record left behind by a people who perhaps destroyed themselves with their own technology and knowledge. Whether that is true or not, his collection remains one of the largest unsolved enigmas in archaeology. Walking through Cabrera's museum today, one cannot help but feel a mix of awe and doubt. Room after room, shelf after shelf is filled with these stones, each engraved with scenes that challenge our sense of time. Are they genuine relics of a lost world, or are they simply the clever inventions of artisans who stumbled upon a profitable trade? The silence of the stones gives no answer. The mystery of the Ica stones lies in this very silence. They stand as physical objects, undeniable in their existence, yet their meaning remains elusive. They are at once a potential key to rewriting human history and an example of how difficult it is to separate truth from invention in archaeology. For those who see them as real, the stones suggest an ancient world filled with wonders and knowledge now lost. For skeptics, they are a fascinating cultural artifact of a different kind, evidence of how myths, hoaxes, and human imagination can shape our understanding of the past. Either way, the Ica stones continue to spark curiosity, debate, and wonder. Perhaps the most fitting way to think of them is as a mirror. They reflect our own hopes, doubts, and beliefs about human history. If you wish to see proof of lost civilizations, the Ica stones seem to provide it. If you prefer to believe in clever forgeries, they also accommodate that view. But one thing is certain: whether real or fake, they hold a power that few artifacts possess. They force us to confront the limits of our knowledge, to question the certainty of timelines, and to imagine that perhaps the ancient world was stranger, more advanced, and more mysterious than we dare to believe. And so the Ica stones remain, silent guardians of a mystery that refuses to be solved, resting in the desert of Peru, waiting for someone, someday, to unlock their secret. The hidden tombs of Sipan, lords of gold. Beneath the dry earth of northern Peru lies a story once lost for centuries, a tale buried in silence, wrapped in dust, and hidden under the relentless desert sun. This is the story of Sipan, a place where golden treasures, ancient lords, and long-forgotten rituals came together to form one of the most breathtaking archaeological discoveries in the Americas. To wander into Sipan is to wander into a world where wealth was not merely measured in riches, but in the power of belief, tradition, and divine connection. The story begins in 1987, when a team of Peruvian archaeologists, led by Walter Alva, uncovered a tomb unlike anything ever seen before in South America. Until then, whispers of looters finding strange objects in the sands of Lambayeque had circulated, but few imagined the magnitude of what was truly buried there. When the team finally reached the tomb, they realized they were standing at the threshold of a discovery so immense it would forever change the understanding of the Mocha civilization. Sipan belonged to the Mocha people, a culture that thrived on Peru's northern coast between the 1st and 8th centuries. Known for their masterful pottery and metallurgical skill, the Mocha left behind some of the most striking artifacts of pre-Columbian times, but nothing compared to the tombs of their rulers. As archaeologists slowly brushed away the centuries of sand and earth, they revealed chambers filled with gold ornaments, intricate jewelry, and ceremonial objects. There were headdresses adorned with turquoise, breastplates shining with gold, earspools crafted with astonishing precision. The body of the Lord of Sipan lay at the heart of it all. Dressed in finery meant not only for life but for eternity. What made this discovery so extraordinary was not only the wealth of gold but the story it told. Around the Lord were the remains of warriors, servants, and even animals, companions chosen to accompany him into the afterlife. Each object, each offering, spoke of a society that placed immense importance on ritual, hierarchy, and cosmic balance. The tombs were like frozen moments in time, snapshots of ceremonies that had once pulsed with life. You can almost imagine the final rites, the flicker of torches, the sound of drums echoing in the night, the priests whispering prayers to the gods of the underworld. The burial was not only an act of reverence, but a performance of power, a declaration that the ruler's spirit would continue to guide the people even after death. For centuries, the sands had protected this story. Looters had come close, and indeed some treasures had already been stolen before Alva's team arrived. But what remained was still astonishing: a complete royal tomb, intact, untouched by time, in ways few archaeologists ever dared to hope. It was quickly hailed as the King Tutankhamun of the Americas, a comparison not lightly made, for both revealed golden riches buried with rulers who were seen as gods among men. But the mystery of Sipan extends beyond the treasures. Who exactly was the Lord of Sipan? Was he merely a ruler, or was he seen as a divine figure, a living embodiment of the gods themselves? The artifacts seem to suggest the latter. He was buried with regalia that matched depictions of warriors and priests in Mochi art. In life, he may have walked among his people as both king and priest, wielding not only earthly authority but spiritual power. The Mochi, after all, were not merely artisans of gold and clay, they were also masters of symbolism. Their art depicts elaborate rituals, sacrifices, and mythological beings. Many scholars believe the tombs mirror these very scenes, as if the burial rites themselves were a reenactment of sacred myths. If true, then Sipan is more than a burial site. It is a stage where myth and reality intertwined. Imagine standing inside that tomb as it was first uncovered, the air thick with the smell of ancient dust, the glimmer of gold catching the beam of a flashlight, the silence broken only by the soft scraping of brushes. In those moments, the archaeologists were not just uncovering objects, they were touching the heartbeat of a civilization long gone. Today, the treasures of Sipan are preserved in museums, safeguarded for future generations, yet their power remains undiminished. To see them up close is to feel the presence of the Lord himself, a reminder that beneath the sands of time lie stories waiting to be told, stories that can shift the way we see history. And so the tombs of Sipan remain both a wonder and a mystery. A wonder because of their unparalleled beauty and the craftsmanship of the Moche, a mystery because the full story of the Lord's reign his rituals, and his people remains incomplete. We can gaze upon the gold, we can study the bones, but the thoughts and voices of the Moche are whispers carried only by the desert wind. The Lord of Sipan sleeps still, not in silence but in the rhythm of questions that echo through time. Who truly was he? What gods did he serve? And how did his people see the thin line between life and eternity? The answers remain buried, half revealed, half hidden, like treasures still waiting beneath the sands. Sipan is not just a tomb, it is a reminder that no matter how much we think we know of the past, the earth keeps secrets. Secrets that, when uncovered, remind us that civilizations rise, flourish, and fall, but their voices, faint though they may be, never completely disappear. The lost city of Vilcabamba, final Inca refuge. When most people think of the Incas, they think of Machu Picchu, the breathtaking citadel, high in the Andes, perched among misty peaks. But Machu Picchu was not the last stronghold of the Inca Empire. Hidden deep within the cloud forests of Peru, there lies a story of a final refuge, a desperate attempt to preserve a way of life against overwhelming odds. That story belongs to Vilcabamba, a city that became both the sanctuary and the grave of the once great Inca civilization. Imagine the year as the 1530s. The Spanish conquistadors, under Francisco Pizarro, have swept across the Andes with shocking speed. They captured Atahualpa, the Inca ruler, and executed him, despite receiving a room filled with gold and silver in ransom. The empire, an empire that had stretched for thousands of miles, with roads, terraces, and cities more advanced than most of Europe at the time, suddenly fractured. The Spanish expected the Inca people to simply surrender, but they did not. They retreated, regrouped, and found strength in places the Spanish could not easily reach. And in the heart of the dense jungle, they built their last stronghold, Vilcabamba. Close your eyes and picture this. The mist hangs heavy over thick, green canopies. The air is damp and buzzing with the sounds of unseen creatures. A narrow path winds its way into the forest, where rivers cut through valleys and hidden plateaus rise from the earth. This is not the open sunlit world of Machu Picchu. This is a realm of shadows and concealment, the perfect place for an empire in hiding. Vilcabamba became more than a city. It was the symbol of survival, the last seat of Inca power. From here, the Inca rulers continued to resist the Spanish for nearly 4 decades after the fall of Cusco. They were known as the Neo-Incas, keeping alive traditions, rituals, and hopes that their empire might someday be restored. The rulers of Vilcabamba, Manco Inca, Sayri Tupac, Titu Cusi, and finally, Tupac Amaru, are remembered as the last sovereigns of the Inca people. Their lives, each tragic in its own way, remind us that history is not only shaped by victories, but also by the determination to resist, even when defeat seems inevitable. Manco Inca, the first to retreat to Vilcabamba, had once been crowned by the Spanish themselves as a puppet ruler. But when he realized their betrayal, he led a massive rebellion, laying siege to Cusco in 1536. The siege nearly succeeded. Spanish accounts describe how they feared being overwhelmed, but reinforcements eventually arrived, and Manco Inca was forced to retreat into the jungles. There, he established Vilcabamba as the new capital, a hidden city from which he continued to harass and resist Spanish forces. For a while, Vilcabamba seemed untouchable. Spanish soldiers feared entering the thick forests, where the terrain was unforgiving, and the Inca warriors fought with a knowledge of the land that their invaders could never match. The jungle itself became an ally to the Incas. The humidity wore down Spanish armor, insects carried disease, and every path was a potential ambush. Think about that for a moment. The empire was gone. The great plazas of Cusco were under Spanish control. Churches were rising where temples once stood. But in the green shadows of Vilcabamba, the spirit of the Incas refused to die. By torchlight, rituals continued. Priests whispered prayers to the old gods. Farmers tended terraced fields carved into mountain slopes. And at night, families must have wondered if their children would grow up free or in chains. Years passed. Leaders changed. Sayri Tupac, Manco Inca's son, eventually negotiated with the Spanish and even accepted baptism, but he lived a short life. Titu Cusi, his brother, continued the resistance, striking Spanish outposts when possible. Yet the world was closing in. The empire that had once stretched from Colombia to Chile was now reduced to one secret valley. Finally, in 1572, the Spanish mounted a campaign to destroy Vilcabamba once and for all. They captured its last ruler, Tupac Amaru, not to be confused with the later revolutionary of the same name, and executed him in Cusco's main square. With his death, the line of the Inca emperors came to an end. Vilcabamba itself was lost to the jungle. For centuries, its location was uncertain. Explorers searched for it, imagining a lost city of the Incas, sometimes confusing it with Machu Picchu. Only in the 20th century did archaeologists correctly identify Espiritu Pampa as the site of the true Vilcabamba. By then, it was little more than ruins, stone foundations overtaken by roots and vines, whispers of a forgotten stand against conquest. When you look at those ruins today, silent and half hidden beneath leaves, it is not the stones themselves that tell the story, but what they represent, the last breath of a civilization that had once been one of the most sophisticated in the world. And there is something profoundly human in that. We remember the Inca not only for their golden treasures, their roads, their terraces, or their citadels high on mountain ridges. We remember them for Vilcabamba, for refusing to vanish quietly, for holding on to identity in the darkest of times. Maybe that is why stories of lost cities still capture us today, because somewhere deep inside, we all know what it means to want to preserve what we love, to keep it safe from forces beyond our control. Vilcabamba may have fallen, but in falling, it became eternal. So when you close your eyes tonight, imagine that final city of the Incas, its torches flickering against damp stone walls, its people whispering to their gods under the jungle sky, its rulers watching the forest for signs of invaders, a place hidden from the world, yet alive in memory. The jungle has taken it back now, but the story lingers, like mist rising from the trees at dawn, and if you listen closely, you can almost hear the echoes of the last Inca voices, refusing to be silenced by time. The Moche pyramids of the sun and moon. When you first hear the words pyramids, your mind probably drifts to Egypt, to the desert sands and the towering monuments of the pharaohs. But hidden along the northern coast of Peru, in the fertile Moche Valley, there are pyramids just as impressive in their own way. Massive adobe structures built not of stone, but of millions upon millions of handmade bricks. They are known as the Huaca del Sol, the Pyramid of the Sun, and the Huaca de la Luna, the Pyramid of the Moon. Together they tell the story of a people whose civilization thrived more than 1,000 years before the rise of the Inca Empire. These pyramids are not just ruins, they are memories in clay, fragile yet enduring, and they open a window into the minds, beliefs, and ambitions of the ancient Moche. Imagine standing in the valley today. To the west, the desert stretches out, dry and endless. To the east, the Andes rise in the distance, and between them, in the flat plain, these two colossal pyramids emerge. The Pyramid of the Sun is the larger of the two. Even in its damaged state, after centuries of erosion and even deliberate destruction, it still rises almost 140 feet tall. At its base, it measures the size of several football fields. Archaeologists estimate that more than 140 million adobe bricks were used to build it. Each brick carries the fingerprint or mark of the laborer who made it. In a way, it's a vast archive of human touch, one brick at a time. Nearby, slightly smaller, but even more mysterious, stands the Pyramid of the Moon. While the Pyramid of the Sun seems to have been more administrative or political, possibly the seat of rulers, the Pyramid of the Moon reveals a darker, more spiritual side of Mocho culture. Inside its walls, archaeologists have uncovered vivid murals still preserved after centuries. These murals show gods, monsters, and rituals, painted in bright reds, yellows, and blacks. The most striking figure is known as the Decapitator, a fearsome deity who holds a ceremonial knife in one hand and a severed human head in the other. This imagery hints at what went on here: ceremonies that involved human sacrifice, offerings to appease the gods, and rituals that shaped the rhythm of Mofkir life. The Mofkir were remarkable engineers and artists. They channeled rivers to irrigate the dry valley, creating fertile fields where crops could grow. Their pottery, some of the finest in the ancient world, depicts everything from daily life to intricate mythologies. Their metalwork shines with gold and silver. And yet, for all their accomplishments, it's the pyramids that truly show the scale of their ambition. Standing before the Huaca del Sol, you cannot help but wonder, how did a people without wheels, without beasts of burden like horses, and without iron tools, manage to build something so massive? Archaeologists believe the pyramids were constructed in stages, each new ruler adding a layer on top of the old. Over generations, the Huacas became not just buildings but living records of Mocha society. Each layer was sealed, like a time capsule. When modern archaeologists carefully peeled back these layers, they found remnants of ancient ceremonies, pottery shards, offerings, and sometimes even human remains. Every level of the pyramid is like a chapter in the story of the Mocha. But the story is not only about power and faith, it is also about fragility. In the 17th century, Spanish colonizers diverted the nearby river to destroy part of the Pyramid of the Sun, hoping to uncover treasure. What they left behind was a wounded monument, its once proud face scarred by water. And yet, even in ruins, the pyramid still dominates the valley. The Pyramid of the Moon, spared from such deliberate destruction, remains better preserved. Walking through it today, you can still see murals of warriors, priests, and gods, their colors surprisingly vivid despite centuries exposed to the elements. Close your eyes for a moment and picture this place at its height, around 1,500 years ago. Imagine the valley filled with people, farmers bringing offerings from their fields, artisans crafting pots and ornaments, priests preparing ceremonies. The pyramids would have been painted, their adobe walls gleaming in the sun. At the Pyramid of the Moon, processions might climb the stairways, carrying offerings, chanting, and perhaps leading captives. The sounds of drums and conch shells would echo across the valley, mixing with the cries of birds overhead. It was not just a city, it was a stage where life, death, and belief all played their parts. What makes these pyramids even more haunting is what they reveal about the cycle of civilizations. The Moche flourished between 100 and 800 CE. But then their world began to unravel. Climate shifts brought devastating droughts followed by floods. Their irrigation canals failed, crops withered, social unrest grew, and the once powerful rulers of the pyramids lost their hold. By the time the Inca rose centuries later, the pyramids of the Moche were already silent ruins, their rituals long forgotten, and yet, here they still stand, whispering their story to anyone who lingers long enough to listen. Archaeologists continue to work here, carefully uncovering new murals and artifacts. Each discovery feels like meeting the Moche anew. A pot painted with scenes of daily life, a wall revealing once hidden gods, a skeleton that tells of sacrifice or struggle. Bit by bit, the Moche world comes into focus again, and with every new piece, the pyramids remind us that civilizations can rise to incredible heights, shaping their environment, leaving behind art and architecture of staggering scale and still, eventually, fade into mystery. Now, think of how fragile these pyramids are. Built of adobe, they were never meant to withstand endless centuries of rain and wind, and yet they endure. Standing at their base, you might run your hand across a sun-baked brick and feel the warmth of the earth still within it. You might imagine the worker who pressed that brick into shape over 1,000 years ago, leaving a fingerprint that survived all this time. These tiny, human details make the pyramids feel alive in a way that even stone monuments sometimes do not. As night falls over the valley, the silhouettes of the pyramids darken against the fading sky. The desert grows quiet, and the air cools. You can almost picture a time when the pyramids glowed with torches, when priests walked their stairways under the stars, when the gods of the Mocha watched from the murals within. Today they stand silent, but their silence is not empty. It is filled with the echoes of a people who lived, dreamed, built, and believed with intensity. The pyramids of the sun and the moon are not just ruins in Peru. They are reminders that every civilization leaves behind traces of its greatness and its struggles. Some are written in stone, some in gold, and some, like these, in the fragile bricks of earth itself, and even as they crumble, they continue to speak. So if you ever find yourself in the Mocha Valley, standing between the Huaca del Sol and the Huaca de la Luna, take a moment to close your eyes, listen to the wind, imagine the voices of the Mocha, still carried across the centuries, and know that you are standing in a place where human hands once built mountains of faith and ambition, brick by brick, breath by breath, lifetime by lifetime. The Pyramid of Tucumán, Valley of 26 Temples. If you were to stand in the Lambayeque Valley of northern Peru, the landscape would at first seem quiet, almost ordinary. But as your eyes adjust, you'd notice a strange sight: giant mounds of earth, weathered by centuries of sun and wind, scattered across the valley floor. At first, they look like natural hills, but step closer and you realize they are not hills at all. They are pyramids, 26 of them, rising from the desert, forming what locals call Tucumán, the Valley of the Pyramids. Imagine this scene centuries ago. Instead of crumbling ruins, these massive structures stood sharp-edged and towering. Walls were covered with painted friezes. Ceremonial plazas bustled with priests, warriors, and farmers. Fires flickered from temple tops, casting long shadows over the land. Tucumán was alive. What makes this valley extraordinary is not just the scale, it's the mystery of why so many pyramids were built together, and why they were eventually abandoned. The largest pyramid here is Huaca Larga, or the Long Temple. It stretches nearly 700 meters longer than many modern skyscrapers if you laid them on their side. Standing at its base, you'd feel dwarfed by sheer scale. Built entirely from adobe bricks, millions of them. The pyramid once served as the central hub of ceremonies, governance, and perhaps even sacrifices. But Huaca Larga is only one of many. Around it, 25 other pyramids rise, each one connected by plazas, courtyards, and causeways. From above, the layout seems almost like a city plan. Some archaeologists believe Tucumán was not just a religious site, it may have been the spiritual capital of an entire region. And yet the mystery deepens. Who exactly built these pyramids? Tucumán has layers of history. The Lambayeque culture first constructed them around the 11th century. Later, the Chimu added to them, followed by the Inca. Each culture seemed drawn to this place, as if it carried a sacred energy that could not be ignored. The Lambayeque themselves were fascinating. Known for their incredible goldwork and complex irrigation, They transformed the desert into farmland. They believed in powerful deities connected to the sea and the sky. For them, building a pyramid was not just about creating a temple, it was about reshaping the landscape into a sacred space. Each pyramid was like a bridge between the earthly and the divine, but the rituals here could be dark. Archaeological digs have revealed burials with signs of human sacrifice, victims offered to the gods, perhaps during times of drought or crisis. Imagine the fear and awe as hundreds gathered in the plaza, drums pounding, incense filling the air, priests chanting. In those moments, the pyramid wasn't just stone and earth. It was alive with energy, a stage between mortals and gods. And then, centuries later, something happened. Tukumi was abandoned. Many pyramids were burned, as if deliberately destroyed. Was it rebellion? Was it fear of curses? Some believe the people thought their gods had turned against them. Legends say Tukumi was cursed, and that those who ruled from there would meet tragic ends. Even Spanish chroniclers noted how locals refused to approach the pyramids, fearing misfortune. Today, the pyramids are quiet again. Winds sweep across their eroded walls. Vultures circle overhead. But if you walk through the site in the late afternoon, you can still feel a weight in the air, a sense that this was once a place of immense power. Archaeologists continue to uncover clues, frescoes of mythological creatures, offerings of shells and ceramics, pathways that connect pyramid to pyramid, as if guiding processions through a ritual map. The more that is uncovered, the clearer it becomes. Tukumi was more than a city, it was a spiritual landscape, a valley transformed into a temple complex. And yet, one question lingers: why 26 pyramids? Most cultures built one great ceremonial pyramid to serve as their sacred center, but here, new pyramids kept rising, one after another. Some suggest each ruler built a new one, abandoning the old to avoid curses. Others believe the pyramids aligned with celestial patterns, mapping the stars across the earth. If so, then walking through Tukumi might have felt like walking through the heavens themselves. Picture yourself there at sunset. The sky glows orange, shadows stretch long across the valley. You stand between the pyramids, silence pressing in, broken only by the wind. You can almost hear echoes, chants, drums, footsteps in the sand. Time feels thinner here, as though the centuries between then and now are just a veil you could step through. The Valley of 26 Temples remains a puzzle. We know who built them, but not fully why they built so many, or why they abandoned them in fire and fear. Perhaps the pyramids themselves hold the answer. Perhaps they are messages written in earth and stone, waiting for us to learn how to read them. Until then, Tukumi stands as a silent witness, a valley where pyramids rise like forgotten giants, keeping their secrets in the sand. The stone carvings of Sehut, hydraulic mystery. High in the Peruvian Andes, in a quiet and often overlooked part of the landscape, lies a massive stone block that has baffled scholars for decades. Known as the Sehut monolith, this carved rock is unlike anything else in the region. At first glance, it might look like a massive boulder scattered among the ruins, but a closer inspection reveals something far more unusual. Its surface is covered with hundreds of carefully carved figures, channels, basins, stairways, and miniature terraces, etched into stone with a level of precision that raises more questions than answers. The monolith is not small. It measures roughly 4 meters long and 2 meters wide, weighing many tons. On its surface, there are over 200 figures carved into the granite. These figures include animals such as frogs, reptiles, and felines, but also a complex system of canals and water channels. Many of the features look like miniature aqueducts or symbolic representations of hydraulic engineering. What is striking is the way these channels connect to one another, forming what looks almost like a model of a flowing water system. Some archaeologists believe the stone might have been a scale model, a kind of three-dimensional blueprint for water distribution systems. Water was life in the Andes. Ancient civilizations such as the Inca and those before them had to master the art of water management in order to survive in this challenging environment. Rainfall was seasonal, and without clever ways of storing and distributing water, entire communities could not thrive. The Sehut monolith might have been a demonstration tool, showing how canals, reservoirs, and terraces could work together to move water across an arid landscape. Imagine an engineer standing before this carved rock, pouring water into its channels to show how it would flow, split, or pool in different areas. But there is a catch. No one knows for sure who created the monolith or when. The site of Sehut itself is believed to have been occupied long before the Inca rose to prominence. Some suggest the stone predates them by centuries, possibly even millennia. This uncertainty only deepens the mystery, because the level of detail and sophistication seen in the carvings seems beyond what we would expect from a prototype tool. Was this truly just a model, or did it serve a more ceremonial or spiritual purpose? Many of the carved animals are closely associated with water in Andean culture. Frogs, for example, were seen as rainbringers, creatures tied to fertility and abundance. Snakes and reptiles also often symbolized flowing rivers or underground streams. To the people of the Andes, water was not just a resource but a sacred force, and it was often linked to rituals and deities. This raises the possibility that the Sayhuite monolith was not just a model but also a ritual stone, a sacred object used in ceremonies to summon or honor water. Some archaeologists have even suggested that the stone might have been used in practice. Water could be poured over its channels to demonstrate both engineering principles and to act as a ritual simulation of rainfall and abundance. Imagine the scene. Priests or leaders gather around the monolith, pouring water from containers, watching it snake through the carved pathways, while the community interprets the flow as a sign from the gods. Yet there are alternative ideas as well. Some researchers have argued that the stone might represent a symbolic map of the world, as understood by the ancient Andean people. Each channel, basin, and animal might not correspond to an actual waterway or system but to a cosmological idea. Rivers of the underworld, lakes of the sky, and creatures that guard the cycles of water and life. In this interpretation, the Sayhuite stone becomes not just a hydraulic model but a sacred microcosm of existence itself. Adding to the mystery is the fact that Sayhuite was likely an important ceremonial center. The site contains other ruins, terraces, and evidence of ritual activity. The monolith itself might have been the centerpiece of a larger ritual space, perhaps aligned with celestial events or linked to the cycles of planting and harvest. If so, the stone was not meant to be practical at all, but symbolic. A way of teaching or reinforcing the cultural and spiritual relationship people had with water. One detail that often strikes visitors is the craftsmanship of the carvings. Granite is extremely hard, yet the channels and basins cut into the monolith are smooth and precise. To this day, archaeologists debate what tools were used. The conventional explanation is that artisans used stone hammers and abrasives, patiently working over years to shape the channels. But there are those who find this unsatisfying. The precision and uniformity of the channels seem almost mechanical, leading to fringe theories that suggest more advanced methods of stone shaping, methods that have since been lost to time. This uncertainty opens the door to speculation. Some researchers propose that Sayhuite could be evidence of a forgotten culture in the Andes, one that predates even the Inca. If such a culture had advanced knowledge of hydraulics and stoneworking, their contributions may have been absorbed or erased by later civilizations. This might explain why the Sayhuite monolith appears so unique. There is nothing else quite like it in Andean archaeology. Others, more speculative still, have suggested that the monolith might not just be symbolic but a literal model of something greater. Could it represent a vast hydraulic network now lost to time? Perhaps it was a scaled representation of how an ancient civilization planned to control water on a much larger scale, across valleys and mountains. If true, then the stone becomes a rare glimpse into a grand vision of engineering that never survived in physical form. Of course, mainstream archaeology remains cautious. Without inscriptions, written records, or direct evidence, much of the Sayhuite monolith's purpose remains conjecture. What we know for certain is that it captivated the people of the region and continues to fascinate those who study it today. Standing before the Sayhuite stone, one cannot help but wonder about the hands that carved it. Was it a group of artisans following a master engineer's plan? Was it the work of priests blending practical knowledge with spiritual symbolism? Or was it perhaps a teaching tool, something used to educate young apprentices in the art of water management? Even now, researchers occasionally pour water over the monolith to see how it behaves. The channels guide the liquid along predetermined paths, pooling in certain areas before cascading into others. Watching the water flow, one begins to see the genius of its design. It feels both functional and ceremonial at the same time, as if practicality and spirituality were woven together into one object. There is also a haunting element to Sayhuite. It stands in relative isolation, surrounded by the quiet Andes, its purpose silenced by time. Unlike the grand pyramids of Egypt, or the monumental stone walls of Cusco, the Sayhuite monolith does not dominate the landscape. Instead, it hides its mystery on its surface, waiting for the careful observer to notice its secrets. This quiet stone whispers of knowledge lost, of a people who understood water in ways we are only beginning to rediscover. Today, as modern societies struggle with water shortages, droughts, and the challenges of managing this vital resource, the Sayhuite monolith reminds us that ancient civilizations were deeply attuned to these same problems. They sought not only practical solutions but also spiritual ones, weaving their survival into the rhythms of nature. The Sayhuite stone continues to invite questions. Was it a sacred altar, a hydraulic model, a symbolic cosmos, or all of these at once? Its mystery lies not just in its carvings but in the silence of the centuries that followed. We may never fully understand what the people of Sayhuite intended, but standing before it, one feels a deep respect for their ingenuity and their reverence for water. In the end, the Sayhuite monolith is more than a carved rock. It is a testament to the enduring mystery of human creativity. a reminder that even in the most unexpected places, ancient people left behind puzzles that we are still struggling to solve. And perhaps that is the point, that the mystery itself keeps the stone alive in our imagination, connecting us across time to the unknown minds who once shaped it with such care. The Rongcheng bronze bird, ancient flying relic. In the world of ancient artifacts, some discoveries appear ordinary at first glance, yet when studied carefully, they open up questions far larger than the object itself. The Rongcheng bronze bird, unearthed in China, belongs to that rare category. It is small, crafted with skill, and shaped like a bird. But what truly makes it unusual is that many believe it resembles a flying machine. This artifact has puzzled archaeologists, engineers, and historians, as it seems to suggest that ancient cultures might have had knowledge of flight, or at least ideas that came shockingly close to modern aeronautical design. When it was first found, the bronze bird seemed like just another ceremonial piece. But as researchers began to examine its form, they noticed something striking. The bird is streamlined, with wings that are unusually shaped, not like a natural bird in flight, but more like a machine attempting to mimic one. The tail is narrow, almost like a rudder, and the body is elongated in a way that resembles an aerodynamic fuselage. At a glance, it looks less like a creature of nature and more like a model of something engineered to cut through the air. Now, in many parts of the world, artifacts shaped like animals were common in ancient cultures. Birds especially held symbolic meaning. They represented the sky, freedom, gods, or the movement between the earthly and spiritual worlds. But the Rongcheng bronze bird stands out because it does not appear purely symbolic. There are too many mechanical-like features for it to be dismissed as a simple totem. Its smooth edges, balanced proportions, and almost mathematical symmetry suggest careful calculation rather than decorative whim. What adds to the mystery is the question of why it was made. Was it a ritual object, perhaps meant to honor sky deities, or was it a functional model, built by ancient engineers experimenting with the possibility of human flight? We cannot say for certain, but the idea that this artifact may have been more than symbolic fuels endless speculation. Some argue that it could have been a child's toy, a simple trinket. Yet, even if that were true, why would the toy resemble a design closer to an aircraft than an organic bird? Others believe it may have been used in rituals where objects were thrown or glided to symbolize spiritual journeys, suggesting that its aerodynamic shape had a practical purpose. The artifact has also drawn comparisons to other ancient discoveries that suggest early experiments with flight. For example, in Egypt, a wooden artifact, known as the Saqqara bird, has long been debated for its similarities to a glider. Like the Rongcheng bronze bird, the Saqqara artifact does not look quite like a natural bird, but instead has features that hint at aeronautics, straight wings, tail structures, and an overall design not typical of symbolic carvings. To see a similar mystery arise in China raises questions about whether different ancient cultures, separated by vast distances, independently explored the possibility of human flight. In Rongcheng, where the bird was found, ancient Chinese culture was already advanced in metallurgy, astronomy, and mechanics. Records show that early Chinese inventors created kites, intricate bronze mechanisms, and even simple mechanical automata. So the idea that someone in this culture might have experimented with flight is not impossible. Kites themselves, after all, are a form of controlled flight, and they were invented in China thousands of years ago. Could the Rongcheng bronze bird have been related to such experiments? Perhaps a model tested in the wind, or even a ritual item inspired by kites soaring above. As you imagine the artifact in your mind, picture its bronze surface, smoothed over centuries, reflecting light in a soft glow. It is small enough to hold, yet when studied, it carries an immense weight of meaning. The bird's wings stretch outward, but they are too straight to mimic a living bird's flapping form. Instead, they resemble fixed wings, like those of modern aircraft. The tail tapers in a way that suggests stabilization, again more mechanical than natural. If it were truly a ceremonial bird, why would it not resemble the flowing curves of cranes, eagles, or sparrows? Creatures so important in Chinese symbolism, why does it look instead like something out of place in time? One of the most compelling aspects of the Rongcheng bronze bird is that it continues to resist clear categorization. Archaeologists carefully avoid exaggerating its meaning, choosing instead to describe it as an artifact of uncertain purpose. Yet engineers and enthusiasts often see more in it. They point out its uncanny resemblance to aerodynamic designs, noting that even small details align with modern understanding of airflow. Whether intentional or coincidental, this overlap sparks a fascinating thought. Could ancient people have observed flight so closely, perhaps through the study of birds or through kite experiments, that they stumbled upon design principles still used today? Some researchers also consider the possibility that the bird was symbolic in a way that just happens to appear mechanical. In Chinese culture, birds often symbolize the soul's journey, immortality, and the connection between heaven and earth. By giving the bird a shape that looked swift and aerodynamic, the artist might have been representing the speed and freedom of the spirit. If that were the case, then its mechanical look would be a coincidence, an artistic choice rather than a technological hint. Yet coincidences this precise always leave a lingering doubt. To better understand, we can place the Rongcheng bronze bird into a larger context of ancient mysteries. All around the world, artifacts that do not quite fit their time continue to surface. They are usually small objects, not grand monuments, but they raise questions no less profound. The bird sits alongside the Antikythera mechanism, the Baghdad battery, and the Saqqara bird, as examples of items that spark debates about lost knowledge. Each one might have an ordinary explanation, but each one also holds the possibility of forgotten experimentation, fragments of knowledge that history did not preserve in full. When you think about this artifact late at night, in the quiet moments, the image of a bronze bird shaped like a flying machine has a way of staying with you. You imagine ancient craftsmen carefully pouring molten bronze into molds, their hands shaping the wings and tail with precision. Did they know they were creating something that would confuse people thousands of years later? Or were they simply making what felt natural to them, unaware that their design would look futuristic to modern eyes? The thought alone is enough to blur the lines between the ancient and the present, leaving you with a gentle sense of wonder. Perhaps the greatest mystery of the Rongcheng bronze bird is not whether it was a model of an aircraft, but what it tells us about human imagination. Long before the Wright brothers, long before modern science, people dreamed of the sky. They looked at birds and wondered what it would take to join them. They created kites. They built myths of winged gods, and maybe, just maybe, they crafted bronze artifacts that looked like flying machines. Whether or not this bird was an experiment in flight, it is certainly proof of a dream, the dream of leaving the ground behind and touching the heavens. As you let these thoughts settle, the pace of the story slows, much like the drifting of a kite through a gentle breeze. The bird rests silently in its display case today, far removed from the hands that made it. Yet in its silence, it continues to whisper questions. Was it symbolic, functional, experimental, or all of these at once? No answer is final, but that is what keeps it alive in our imagination. And in that way, the Rongcheng bronze bird remains not just an artifact, but a doorway into the timeless human desire to fly, to explore, and to reach for what lies beyond. The mystery of the Shugborough inscription. Still unsolved code. On the grounds of Shugborough Hall in Staffordshire, England, there is a monument that has puzzled scholars, cryptographers, and curious minds for centuries. It is not a large structure, nor does it appear at first glance to be extraordinary. To the casual visitor, it looks like a simple stone monument with a carving of shepherds in a pastoral scene. Yet beneath this seemingly ordinary artwork lies one of the most enduring unsolved mysteries in England. A string of letters carved into the stone that no one has ever been able to decipher with certainty. Those letters, O-U, O-S, V-A-V-V, framed between the letters D and M, have kept historians and codebreakers awake for generations. The monument itself is known as the Shepherd's Monument, commissioned in the mid-18th century by Thomas Anson, a wealthy landowner, traveler, and member of a circle of intellectuals. The monument is a sculpted relief based on a famous painting by Nicolas Poussin called The Shepherds of Arcadia. In the relief, shepherds are gathered around a tomb, reading an inscription, but what makes the Shugborough version unique is the addition of that cryptic code beneath it. At first it seems like a harmless flourish, perhaps the initials of the sculptor or a playful touch by Anson himself. But as time passed, people began to suspect that it was something more, something hidden, deliberately placed, meant to convey a secret. The first puzzle is the string of letters itself, O-U, O-S, V-A. Between them, the larger letters D and M appear, which many have interpreted as dis manibus, a Latin phrase often found on Roman tombstones meaning dedicated to the spirits of the dead. If that interpretation is correct, then the sequence might be related to themes of death, memory, or an epitaph. Yet the central code has resisted all straightforward explanations. Over the centuries, dozens of theories have emerged. Some suggest the code hides a Latin phrase abbreviated into letters. Others think it is an anagram, or even a cipher used by secret societies like the Freemasons or the Rosicrucians. The Shugborough family itself was well connected to intellectual and esoteric circles of the time, and Thomas Anson's brother, Admiral George Anson, was a famous voyager who brought back treasures and stories from around the globe. This background makes it tempting to imagine that the code is not random at all, but a carefully designed puzzle linked to knowledge, travels, or hidden truths. One of the most popular theories is that the code has a connection to the Holy Grail. This idea was especially fueled in the 20th century, when Poussin's painting and its supposed links to secret knowledge about the Grail became the subject of books and speculation. Since the monument reproduces Poussin's Shepherds of Arcadia, some argue that the cryptic letters beneath might point to hidden Grail lore. Was Thomas Anson hinting at something he believed was passed down through secret societies, something encoded in art, in stone, and in carefully guarded knowledge? Others, however, prefer more straightforward explanations. Some scholars suggest that the letters could be a simple memorial code, initials of a family motto, or a verse known to the Anson family and now lost to time. For instance, one theory proposes that the letters stand for the Latin phrase optime uxoris, optime sororis, viduus amontissimus, vovit virtutibus, which translates loosely to best of wives, best of sisters, a most devoted widower, dedicates this to your virtues. If true, the code may have been a deeply personal inscription, understandable only to those in Anson's immediate circle. But there is no definitive proof of this, and other explanations are just as plausible. What makes the mystery especially fascinating is the caliber of people who have tried and failed to solve it. During World War II, when Britain relied on its best codebreakers to crack the Enigma machine, even experts at Bletchley Park were said to have looked at the Shugborough code. If the men and women who unraveled Nazi encryption systems could not solve a handful of letters carved in stone, it speaks volumes about the difficulty of the puzzle, or perhaps the possibility that it was never meant to be solved by outsiders at all. The monument has continued to attract attention in modern times. Cryptographers, historians, and amateur enthusiasts have all proposed solutions, but none have gained universal acceptance. Some theories stretch toward religious symbolism, others toward mathematical patterns hidden in the sequence, while still others suggest that the placement of the letters and their spacing could be significant. The lack of definitive proof keeps the mystery alive. Standing before the monument, one cannot help but wonder about the intentions of those who created it. Was Thomas Anson deliberately encoding a message for future generations, knowing it would baffle them, or was it meant to be understood only by a select group in his lifetime, with the meaning never intended to be shared? The possibility that the answer has been lost forever is both frustrating and deeply intriguing. And yet, this is the power of the Shugborough inscription. Its simplicity is its strength. It is not a grand pyramid or a vast city buried under the sea. It is a short sequence of letters on a modest monument, but its ability to resist explanation, despite centuries of effort, makes it as mysterious as any ancient ruin. When you stand there, in the gardens of Shugborough, gazing at the code carved into the stone, you feel the presence of something deliberately withheld, as though the past is whispering a secret you cannot quite hear. Perhaps the greatest mystery of all is why we are so drawn to it. The human mind is naturally restless when confronted with an unanswered question. A line of letters like OUOSVAVV invites us to project meaning, to test possibilities, to imagine hidden connections. In this way, the code does not only belong to the Ansons or to 18th century England, it belongs to anyone who has ever looked at a riddle and longed to know the truth. The Shugborough inscription remains unsolved. Scholars will continue to debate it, and new theories will continue to emerge, but for now the meaning of the letters is as elusive as ever, and perhaps that is the way it was always meant to be. A reminder that some mysteries endure, not because they cannot be solved, but because they exist to keep us searching. The hypogeum of Halsaflieni figurines, Sleeping Lady of Malta. Hidden beneath the streets of Paola, Malta, lies one of the most extraordinary archaeological sites in the world, the hypogeum of Halsaflieni. From the outside, nothing hints at the secrets buried below. It looks like an ordinary urban setting, with homes and businesses scattered across the surface. But beneath this seemingly mundane landscape is an underground labyrinth carved thousands of years ago, where stone chambers, carved passages, and ancient relics preserve the whispers of a civilization long gone. Among the many mysteries discovered in this subterranean necropolis, one artifact stands out as both haunting and mesmerizing: the Sleeping Lady of Malta. This small figurine, carved with astonishing precision, depicts a woman in repose, lying peacefully, perhaps in eternal rest. And yet, despite its size, it carries immense weight. It is not just a relic of craftsmanship, but a symbol of one of the oldest and most enigmatic prehistoric cultures in the Mediterranean. The hypogeum itself was discovered by accident in 1902. A stonemason, while digging for a cistern, broke through into what seemed like a void. What he had uncovered was no ordinary chamber, but the entrance to an immense underground sanctuary, carved directly into the limestone bedrock. As archaeologists explored further, they realized they were not just dealing with a single chamber, but with an extensive three-level complex that had been deliberately planned and executed. The hypogeum dates back to around 4000 BCE, placing it firmly within Malta's Neolithic period. It is older than Stonehenge, and older than the Great Pyramids of Egypt. This alone places it among the most impressive achievements of ancient human engineering. The underground labyrinth extends some 11 meters below ground, and within its chambers, archaeologists found human remains, intricate carvings, and mysterious figurines. The sleeping lady, discovered within this sacred underground world, is carved from terracotta and measures only a few inches in length. She is portrayed lying on her side, reclining on what appears to be a couch or bed. Her arms are tucked under her head, her legs bent slightly at the knees, and her body rendered with a fullness that emphasizes curves and volume. Her posture is serene, as if caught between sleep and eternity. Why was she made? Who placed her in the hypogeum? And what role did she play in the spiritual lives of Malta's ancient inhabitants? The prevailing interpretation is that the figurine is connected to a cult of fertility or the worship of a mother goddess. Across Neolithic Europe, similar figurines have been found, depictions of women with exaggerated features that symbolize fertility, abundance, and continuity of life. The sleeping lady may have been an embodiment of death as a passage into another kind of life, a visual metaphor for rebirth through the earth itself. Her sleep may represent not the end but the transition, a belief that the afterlife was not final but a continuation. The hypogeum supports this interpretation. Within its halls, archaeologists found the bones of more than 7,000 individuals. This was not merely a tomb but a sacred necropolis, where rituals involving the dead were performed. The figurines found within it suggest that the ancient Maltese saw death not as a severing, but as part of a larger cycle of existence. The architecture of the hypogeum itself reinforces this spiritual dimension. Carved chambers mimic structures that were likely built above ground but now exist only underground. The oracle room, one of the most famous sections, has remarkable acoustics. When someone speaks within it, the sound resonates throughout the complex in a deep, echoing hum. This was not accidental. The builders engineered this effect intentionally, suggesting that rituals involving chanting or incantations were a central part of the ceremonies held there. Imagine priests or shamans lowering their voices, their chants vibrating through the stone, echoing like the voice of the earth itself, reverberating into the ears of those gathered in flickering torchlight. In such a setting, the sleeping lady figurine may have taken on a role as a sacred symbol of rest and passage. And yet, despite these theories, the meaning of the figurine remains elusive. Was she meant to represent an individual woman, perhaps a priestess, perhaps a revered ancestor? Was she symbolic of the collective hope for renewal? Or was she something else entirely, a representation of cosmic forces that guided the Maltese through cycles of life and death? The mystery deepens when one considers the figurine's realism. Unlike many prehistoric figurines that are more abstract or symbolic, the sleeping lady feels almost intimate. The details of her posture, the softness of her form, even the suggestion of fabric around her body, all hint at a deep attention to human presence. She feels less like a symbol and more like a person, caught in a moment of vulnerability, preserved forever in terracotta. Some researchers have suggested that the figurine might have been part of a ritual object used in ceremonies related to dreams or trance states. The hypogeum's subterranean chambers, with their total darkness and acoustic effects, could easily induce altered states of consciousness. In such settings, sleep and dreams might have been considered portals to other realms, and the sleeping lady may have been a guide for those journeys. There is also an intriguing possibility that the sleeping lady was tied to ancestor worship. In many prehistoric societies, the dead were not thought of as gone, but as still present, guiding and influencing the living. The figurine may have embodied a sleeping ancestor, one who rests but whose presence lingers within the walls of the hypogeum. The hypogeum itself is shrouded in further mysteries. Many of the bones discovered there have since disappeared. Records from the early excavations suggest that unusual skeletal remains were found, some with elongated skulls that sparked theories about unique physical traits among the ancient Maltese. Yet much of this evidence is now missing, leaving behind speculation but no conclusive answers. Some suggest that these elongated skulls may have been natural variations, while others whisper about genetic anomalies or even contacts with outsiders. The disappearance of these remains only adds to the sense that the hypogeum guards secrets still untold. Adding another layer of intrigue is the question of how the hypogeum was even built. Carving such an elaborate multi-level complex into solid limestone using only stone and bone tools seems almost impossible, yet the builders managed it, creating chambers with smooth walls, architectural features, and even decorative carvings. The sheer effort and planning involved suggest a society that was both organized and deeply motivated by spiritual belief. The sleeping lady, then, must be seen not in isolation but as part of this grander context. She is a piece of a larger puzzle, a small yet potent artifact within a vast spiritual landscape. She represents a human attempt to capture the mysteries of life, death, and what lies beyond. Today, the figurine rests in the National Museum of Archaeology in Valletta, carefully preserved under glass. Visitors who gaze upon her often remark on the strange sense of calm she radiates. Despite her age, despite the millennia that separate us from the world that made her, she feels oddly familiar. We recognize the posture of sleep, the curves of the human body, the vulnerability of rest, and perhaps that is why she resonates so deeply. Across time and culture, sleep is something we all know, both its comfort and its mystery. The hypogeum of Halsaflieni, with its hidden chambers, echoing acoustics, and its sleeping lady figurine, remains one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites in Europe. It reminds us that long before the written word, long before recorded history, people were already grappling with the biggest questions. What happens when we die? Where do we go? And how do we prepare for that journey? As you think of the sleeping lady of Malta, imagine her resting posture, preserved for over 5,000 years. She is asleep, yet eternal. A quiet reminder that the mysteries of the past are not always about grand monuments or colossal structures, but can also be held within the delicate curve of a small terracotta figure lying still in the shadows of the earth. The hypogeum whispers, but the sleeping lady dreams, and in her dreams lies one of humanity's oldest unsolved mysteries, the Loughcrew cairns carvings, ancient cosmic calendar. In the gentle hills of County Meath, Ireland, lies a place that feels far removed from the present day. The site is known as Loughcrew, a complex of ancient passage tombs scattered across several hills. To the untrained eye, these grass-covered mounds might look like nothing more than small hills themselves, blending into the rolling countryside, yet hidden within them are chambers and carvings that speak of a civilization thousands of years old, one that not only built monuments of stone, but also seemed to possess an advanced understanding of the cosmos. Loughcrew is older than the pyramids of Egypt, with origins stretching back over 5,000 years. Archaeologists estimate that the cairns, or stone mounds, were constructed during the Neolithic period, making them some of the oldest surviving structures in Europe. But while their age alone is remarkable, what truly sets them apart are the carvings etched into the stones deep inside the chambers. Spirals, concentric circles, star-like patterns, and mysterious symbols cover the rock surfaces, as if the builders were recording something of vital importance. When early explorers first rediscovered these carvings in the 19th century, they were astonished at both their beauty and their precision. The engravings didn't appear to be random. Many were aligned in ways that seemed to correspond with astronomical events, the rising and setting of the sun at solstices and equinoxes. This led some researchers to call Loughcrew an ancient cosmic calendar, a place where the movements of the heavens were recorded and possibly celebrated. At the heart of the site is Cairn T, the most famous of the passage tombs. Its long narrow passage leads into a cruciform chamber, and at the very back rests a large decorated stone sometimes referred to as the equinox stone. On the mornings of the spring and autumn equinox, the rising sun shines through the passage and illuminates the carvings on this stone, filling the chamber with light. It is a dramatic reminder that the builders had both the architectural skill and the astronomical knowledge to align their structure with the cycles of the sun. But the carvings themselves hold even more mysteries. Some appear to depict solar symbols, while others resemble star maps. One stone features repeating patterns of diamonds and lozenges, perhaps symbolizing fertility, rebirth, or the cycles of life. Another shows what looks like a wheel or starburst. To modern eyes, they appear almost mathematical in nature, hinting at a worldview where the movement of the sky was not only observed but deeply integrated into spiritual life. The people who carved these symbols left no written language, no scrolls or records to explain their meaning. What survives are only these cryptic images. Were they marking time, tracking the length of seasons? Were they recording eclipses, solstices, or the rhythms of the moon? Or were they spiritual symbols, created for rituals now long forgotten? Each possibility only deepens the mystery. Archaeologists suggest that Loughcrew may have served as both a burial ground and a ceremonial center. Bones and cremated remains were discovered in some of the tombs, indicating that the dead were placed here with great reverence. The carvings, then, may have been meant to guide the souls of the dead, aligning their journey with the eternal cycles of the cosmos. In this view, death was not an end, but a transformation, tied to the movements of the sun and stars. But there are also researchers who believe the carvings show a level of scientific understanding far beyond what we normally associate with Neolithic people. The careful alignment of the equinox stone suggests an advanced ability to measure time and predict celestial events. Could these people have been early astronomers, recording knowledge that would later be lost for centuries? Local legends add yet another layer of intrigue. The Loughcrew Hills are sometimes called the Hills of the Witch. According to folklore, a giant witch leapt from hill to hill, dropping stones from her apron to create the cairns. If she succeeded in leaping all the way across the hills, she would have gained great power, but she fell and was killed. Her story echoes the sense of ancient magic and mystery that clings to the site even today. Standing inside Cairn 2 during the equinox, watching the sunlight pierce the darkness and strike the carved stones, one cannot help but feel connected to something vast and timeless. The same sun that rose for the builders thousands of years ago still rises today, marking the cycles of life that continue unbroken. And yet, despite all our modern science and technology, we are left with questions the builders never answered. Why did they devote such immense effort to constructing these cairns? How did they achieve such precise alignments without modern instruments? And what was the true purpose of the enigmatic carvings? Art, astronomy, spirituality, or something else entirely? The Lofcru cairns remain silent, their stones weathered by wind and rain, their carvings fading with time. But the mystery endures. They remind us that even in the distant past, humans looked to the sky with wonder, seeking patterns and meaning, and leaving behind monuments that continue to puzzle us. The cairns are not just graves or ancient calendars. They are enduring symbols of the human quest to understand the universe, a quest that began long before history was written and continues today. In this way, the carvings of Lofcru invite us into a dialogue across millennia. Their creators may never have imagined that future generations would still be studying them, still marveling at their skill, still asking the same questions about life, death, and the stars. And so the cairns stand, silent yet eloquent, a cosmic calendar carved in stone, waiting for us to listen.